Good afternoon. If the board members could sit themselves down.
Happy holidays.
Can I have order, please? I don't want to hit the order, please. We've got a lot of deputations today. We'd like to hear from everybody, and the sooner we start, the more time we'll have for that. I think we have quorum now.
Yes, we do.
We've got quorum. I'd like to ask if there's any declarations of interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing as there's none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 12 meeting? Commissioner Lalonde with Commissioner Osborne, done. If we could go on, I'm going to go through the agenda items, and we'll see which items we have to hold or not. Yes, and the first thing I'd like to suggest is there are 10 or 11 deputants on item number 16, which is the 5-year service plan and tenure outlook, and I'm suggesting, given there are so many deputants, rather than having them wait around all day, for the end of the meeting, I'd like to advance it towards the beginning of the meeting, and I'm suggesting that we put it in as item number 5th. It'll be the 5th item. So I'm going to move the motion that the board alter the order paper such that item number 16 will be considered immediately after item number 4. I think I need a 2/3 vote on this.
Yes, you do. It is a 2/3.
So if you disagree, I'd like to know why, because otherwise it's not going to happen. So all in favor of that? Feel some pressure? There, we did it. So we're going to hold the CEO's report. We're going to hold the ACAT minutes. We're going to hold the presentation of 2019 retiring members, holding their 40, 50, 45, and 50-year service acknowledgement awards. On item number 5, I'd like a motion to adopt the recommendations that were before us on the in-camera session. Commissioner Lalonde, seconded by Councillor McKelvey. All in favor? Done. On item number 6, do I have a motion to approve it? That's the financial update for the period ended October 5. Councillor McKelvey, seconder. Councillor Karagianis, all in favor, done. The supply of genuine OEM Cummins parts. Can I have a motion to approve that? Item number 7. Commissioner Osborne, seconded by Commissioner De Laurentiis. All in favor? Done. Design services number 8, streetcar and bus infrastructure. Can I have a motion to approve that? Commissioner De Laurentiis, seconder. Commissioner Lalonde, all in favor? Item number 10, subway public washroom cleaning. Can I have a motion to approve the recommendations in that report? Commissioner Osborne, seconder. I think I saw Councillor Karagianis put his hand up, so I'll say that he was a seconder. All in favor? Away we go. North York Community Council member motion concerning Allen Greenway appointments, and that's just a request for a further report from staff. So all in favor of that motion? Done. Now, item number 11, I have a very brief motion that I'll present to the board. If there are people who want to hold it, fine, but this is what I'm suggesting that we do right now. Okay. Do I have to move it? Okay, well, you want to second it?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. Councillor Denzelman and Wong will second that motion. All in favor? Done.
Adopt the item as amended.
Adopt the item as amended. Item number 12, we have a deputation, so that is a hold. Item 13, review of 92 Woodbine South bus route. I think this is Councillor Bradford's ward. Would you like to move the motion? Okay, and anything you want to say about it? Seconder, Councillor Carroll.
Absolutely. On behalf of my grandchildren, critique.
Okay. All in favor? Done. Item 14, we have a deputation Item 15, we have a deputation. Item 16, which is now item 5, we have a lengthy series of deputations and a staff presentation, which I know we're looking forward to. Item 17, Commissioner Lalonde, you are the chair of the Audit Committee. Do you have a motion that you'd like to put forward from the committee meeting from this morning?
I do, and it's on the
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Done. Item as amended is approved. So let's go back to the beginning.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So, I just wanted to note, I think we all got a Christmas card from Bombardier, so I wanted to thank them, and I also wanted to note it's the first thing they delivered on time in quite some time.
Oh, man. That was mean. Sorry, yes.
I was thinking, can I hold item 16?
It's held anyway, Jim. Yeah, we're good. So, Jim, we've advanced item 16 to item number 5. Because so the speakers will get a chance to get out of here before.
And Mr. Chair, the clerk may have already mentioned, Eli didn't get his name in
Yes.
on time, but I'm sure that the committee would indulge and add one speaker to item 16.
So there are in fact 2 requests for additional deputants on
Okay.
item now number 5, formerly item number 16. One is Eli Aaron, I think.
Yes.
And the other person is Councillor Perks sent a request to me yesterday.
I'm happy to move them both as a package.
Oh, if you'd like to move a motion to permit those deputants to speak.
Sure.
Commissioner Carroll moved it. All in favor of that motion? Okay, so we move on to the CEO report.
Thank you, through you, Vice Chair Heisey, and good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to start off by acknowledging and thanking staff as well as those citizens out there that have made inquiries regarding Chair Robinson. It's nice to know she has such a nice fan base. I tell you that very likely the chair is watching this meeting right now. When I spoke with her a few weeks ago, she was excited to say that she did watch the last board meeting. And I'll also let you know that she's given me good guidance from the sidelines. So with that, I'll move on. At this time of year, the TTC's thoughts and best wishes go out to residents of 235 Gosford. A 5-alarm fire there killed 1 person, injured 6, and displaced 700 people. The TTC was present the night of November 15th as part of a unified command led by the Toronto Fire Chief. We worked closely with the Red Cross as well as other emergency responders on the scene, working until 3 o'clock that morning to ensure that people were sheltered and safe. I want to thank and acknowledge all those who participated in this efforts. In a speech last week, Mayor Tory detailed how increasing the city building levy would provide vital investment in our multi-year state of good repair program. He stressed that the city building fund would help raise approximately $5 billion that we need for new subway trains, new signals, new streetcars, and station upgrades. The TTC was grateful for his remarks, and we agree wholeheartedly. It's our hope that on December 17, 18, during City Council, that motion will move on that. These are investments that allow us to address the backlog of state of good repair work to upgrade and maintain our aging transit system. Funds for critical projects that you've heard me talk about before, ATC, new trains, our train overhauls, new track, power upgrades, and subway infrastructure. As you know, last week we experienced track level fires on Line 2 that caused a 3-hour delay during morning rush hour. This required us to replace our subway service with 70 shuttle buses between Keele and Ossington stations. The damage was extensive. We believe the source was to have debris collected near the power rail under the wooden cover boards. While debris at track level is not uncommon, we are replacing our old wooden cover boards with a non-combustible fiberglass composite panels, and we're looking at ways to reduce the litter and improve our cleanliness. Commissioners, as you know, on November 30th, the TTC stopped selling tokens, tickets, and passes at collectors' booths and at our customer service center at Davisville Station. All reports are that the transition and communications campaign went very smoothly. The TTC and Presto had plenty of staff ambassadors in the stations to assist customer inquiries and provide direction. I'm grateful to staff and the extra assistance provided in the front lines and to everyone who worked behind the scenes to make this transition as smooth as possible. Our next big target date is moving collectors out of the booths at 20 stations on January 5th of this coming year. They will be positioned at fare lines at the stations to assist customers and validate fares. We currently have 10 stations, as you're aware, without collectors in the booths. These stations are staffed with roving customer service agents as part of the overall station modernization plan. Moving on, the TTC Audit Risk and Compliance Department is currently completing a full fare evasion study on all TTC transit modes. The timing is consistent with the Auditor General's audit last year. The audit has produced results that reflect all TTC ridership, including its geographical areas, peak, off-peak, and weekend service. Preliminary observations, I'll tell you, on streetcar routes continue to highlight the fact that too many individuals don't pay unless there's a visible enforcement on board. And I can tell you it's very disappointing to me with this happening regarding what we've done over the course of the last 6 months. It is my belief that we have a strategic fare inspector and a constable deployment strategy and a campaign remaining that reminds everyone that they're being watched, and this will help reduce fare evasion. We know that the evasion is prevalent, and we're going to be taking some action. I'll let you know that personally, myself and a number of our executive team will be riding streetcars next week with the fare inspectors and the constables, assisting with the message out there publicly. Those who are deliberately cheating the system are costing us tens of millions of dollars, and it has to stop. The results of our internal audit, fare evasion study, and the details of our strategic deployment plan will be presented to this board in February. In this month's CEO report, I talk a little bit about preparing for light rail operations in Toronto with the upcoming Eglinton Crosstown and Finch West projects on the near horizon. In Ottawa, OC Transpo opened its 12.5-kilometer, 13-station Confederation LRT line on September 14th. The new line had experienced some significant operational issues when it actually opened. Early last month, OC Transpo CEO John Manconi reached out to us, and I happened to talk to John on a somewhat of an irregular basis, but over the course of the year many times, and he asked if the TTC could come and visit and examine his daily operation. We sent subject matter experts in the areas of stations, transit control, and light rail operations. TTC staff conducted station-by-station observations in peak and off-peak hours. They provided immediate recommendations and guidance on a host of issues, ranging from how to manage a control center, to their customer communications, to station management, and incident response. Our recommendations were adopted by OC Transpo and their way forward plan. So I'd like to thank our staff for their expertise and wish Ottawa the best of luck as they continue with their the Confederation line. I would tell you in our discussions, though, that this really was about lessons learned for both parties. This was a great experience for the TTC, and we're going to benefit greatly ahead of our opening of the Line 5 Eglinton in just a few years. With respect to the low-floor Bombardier streetcar, we have 199 streetcars delivered today, and they have committed, I talked to them last week, of doing everything possible and working through the holidays to ensure that the 204th streetcar is shipped before the end of the year, a major milestone for our accessibility goals. Once in service, the new vehicles are providing reliable service for our customers, and we continue to work with Bombardier as they improve the reliability even further. I also want to take a moment and thank Bombardier for their lending their assistance and expertise to an issue we experienced on our 501 Queen route, which we saw us pull streetcars from that service on that line. 25 of our new streetcars were damaged by what we believe was a bad piece of track infrastructure. Bombardier crews assisted our mechanics and external experts in reviewing the issue, making repairs, and ensuring that the route was safe to put back in service. I also want to bring to your attention that I'm very pleased to see that I was there firsthand for an incredible turnout at our Trades Expo late last month. Held in North York, the public was invited to speak to TTC staff and recruiters to learn more about the many exciting jobs and job opportunities available in our skilled unskilled trades, apprenticeships, and technical and revenue protection roles. We had hundreds of vacancies at the TTC, and for the first time in years, we actually took the action to go out and find the talent that we need. The two-day event happened on the 26th and 27th of last month, saw 5,000 people pre-registered to attend. Job seekers actually met face-to-face with hiring managers, and recruitment teams from various departments spoke to a diverse and talented pool of applicants eager to start their careers in our many skilled jobs here at the TTC. So it was an incredible event to attend. It was very touching, actually. And finally, just a reminder that if you're busy out shopping this Christmas holiday this weekend, we're conducting 2 toy drives on Saturday, December 14th. Volunteers from our bus divisions are holding a Stuff the Bus toy drive outside the Sherwood Gardens Toys R Us with the Toronto Police Division 22 and the Dream Makers in support of Lamp Community Health Center in the West End. Volunteers from our streetcar divisions are inviting the public to stuff a Santa streetcar with new unwrapped toys at the Woodbine Streetcar Loop on the East End. It's for kids and teens in support of CP24 and Chum Radio Christmas Wish. And this one includes a free ride with Santa on the PCC. We do have much more details on the ttc.ca if anybody's interested. So with that, I just want to wish everybody a happy and safe travels to all and remind everybody that the TTC is the best and safest way to travel during the holidays. Vice Chair, that concludes my opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of Mr. Leary? Councillor Carroll?
Yeah, I just wanted to return for a second for where we're at with Bombardier. The deadlines that we're meeting now and getting to the end of the year, how close is that in line with the renegotiated deadline?
Through you, Chair, I'm celebrating the win that they had 2 years ago. We never thought would be in this position. Yes, they were supposed to be in service and operational, but having them shipped is a really win for us and our customers. And we'll work the rest of that out with them.
Right. Okay. And the 25 cars that are being repaired, I'm assuming being repaired from whatever the track thing, can we go back and make a claim on whoever would have done the track reconstruction where the damage occurred?
Through you, Chair. No, that was basically a failed piece of track, a piece of track that's beyond its life expectancy.
So it wasn't a case of replacement
it was basically
gone wrong, it was old track.
It was old track. We believe it was the east of Roncesvalles on Queen. It was basically a six-inch piece of track that broke on both sides.
Okay, I thought there had been replacement there in the last year or two, but it's a section that was old.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That explains it. Thank you.
So I have a follow-up question to that last question about the track. So why didn't our internal system, why weren't we on top of that old piece of track from a service life point of view, or wasn't that the issue?
So that track is tied into the King, Queen, and Roncesvalles rehabilitation work that we want to get done. So that, as anyone who knows, has been a little bit of a struggle to try to get organized. So at this point in time, because it's amalgamated with a variety of different city works, so that piece of track has been something that we've been trying to nurse along, but it is past its life expectancy. So what we're going to do to be smarter about it is we're going to really pay a lot more attention to that. And from a risk perspective, given the failure we've had and how old the piece of track is, so but 2021 is the goal to amalgamate with the city and actually reconstruct that entire intersection.
And just to put it in context, what will the cost be of repairing the 25 streetcars versus the cost, what it would have been of fixing the track ahead of time?
Through the chair, we haven't done that cost exercise yet, but we can do that.
Motion to receive the CEO's report. All in favor? Item number 2, I'm delighted to introduce Angela Ribeiro, who I've worked with on the ACAT committee. She's going to present the ACAT minutes. She's there. Sorry? Good.
Oh, good afternoon, board members. I'm Angela Ribeiro, one of the vice chairs of ACAT, one of two vice chairs actually of ACAT, and I'm representing Mazen Aribi here today because he is quite unwell and regrets that he could not attend this meeting. I mean, he's not in a dire situation, but he's on medication, so that's why he's not here today. So at the ACAT October meeting, Menu Sikand and Denise Carasso of the Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Center gave a presentation which demonstrated the impact of not having accessible TTC service on Kilgore Road. The center serves more than 200,000 client and family visits per year, in addition to the hundreds of employees and volunteers who also attend the facility. The closest transit stop is 600 meters from Bloorview's doors and is uphill, a difficulty for those with heart, lung, or brain injuries. The debutant's vision is that of moving customers away from paratransit to accessible transit. ACAT supported their presentation and request and referred the matter to service planning for further discussion, and TT staff have also agreed to review service for the area. The next item of the next highlight of our meetings that day in October, at the Design Review Subcommittee meeting on October the 18th, Metrolinx presented the design for the Alstom vehicle that will be used on Line 6, which is Finch West, comparing it to the Bombardier Flexity vehicle that will be used on Line 5, Eglinton. ACAT members expressed concern and objected to several noted features that they saw. The seating fabric colors for both the Alstom and the Bombardier vehicles do not conform to TTC red and blue materials, so that there is not the usual blue priority seating. There is a small number of mobility device spaces, so that members suggested more flip-down seats to replace some of the fixed seats, thus creating additional spaces. Club seating restricts aisle width to 600 meters, limiting knee-foot space between seats. Significantly, space beneath all seats is closed, preventing use of the space for service animals, parcels, backpacks, and reducing the ability of passengers to move feet back to allow for others to pass, as well as impacting the ability of passengers to rise from a seated position. These concerns were pretty significant for all of us, actually. Metrolinx agreed to review and respond to these and other concerns raised by DRS. The other item, the Wheel-Trans Operations Subcommittee reviewed the Wheel-Trans eligibility conditions. Members also reviewed the updated Wheel-Trans no-show notice and changes to the self-booking website. And that's actually our meeting. On behalf, though, of the executive, I invite TTC board members to join ACAT members at the annual year-end luncheon from 11:30 on December the 19th at 1900 Yonge Street. This is actually an important event for us at the end of the year because it's where we meet the new members and we say farewell to those of us who are leaving, one of which are. And finally, my term on ACAT comes to an end this month, and this is an opportunity to thank board members for their many courtesies and most particularly for the respect and attention shown to the advice ACAT members pass on to the board. It has been a pleasure working with Wheel-Trans and TTC staff and ACAT members as we collaborate to address the issues and make recommendations to the board. I wish all of you the best for the next.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you. You're right. So this is probably a good time to ask this question, because you've had lots of time sitting in the committee, and likewise Maz. I had a conversation with a member of the media who was following up on something that he heard at the overall summit. We show in our CEO's report 4 metrics. We have 4 key performance indicators. And he talked about the frustration that users have, Wheel-Trans users have, that doesn't really tell the whole story. Because, the things we're measuring, on-time performance, accommodation rate, and wait time, are measured against the time we agree to during the dispatch. But what isn't being measured is you call in to say, I'd like to be picked up at 1 o'clock, and they say, no can do, but if you're prepared to leave at 10 o'clock in the morning, we can pick you up. We're not tracking that. We don't set a target for how many times can we accommodate for the appropriate time in our key performance indicators. I'm wondering if that discussion has ever happened at ACAT. Has there ever been a request to track that and set a target?
Well, I don't know about a request to track it specifically, but I know we've discussed it. These are the kind of things that come up quite often as part of the family of services.
Yeah.
Which we're transitioning into, and which we recognize down the road with 27,000 people being reassessed.
Yeah.
However, to be more specific, perhaps I could ask Dean, not Dean, sorry, Loudon or Dwayne to respond to your specific question, if I may.
Well, I'm then going to move to that. Maybe I can just move on to. I'm going to be asking staff about it. Whether they've ever looked into how they would do it, what procedure change would be necessary. So, you'll be here to hear that.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. Thank you.
Thanks.
Question to the deputy? No, great. Motion to receive. Thank you very much, Angela.
So I'm wondering if this would be
favor?
the juncture to ask about that.
Sure.
Yeah, I didn't ask during the CEO's report because I wanted to hear from ACAT members about it, because if the discussion's been going on there, then they should be incorporated in it. But it is something that is going to be focused on in the media. By not tracking how many times we're able to accommodate the specific time that's needed for a medical appointment, or even an appointment like today. Someone could come to the Ttc meeting today and be told, even if they're willing to use the family of service model, we can't get you from your door to the subway station at 11 o'clock in the morning, but would you leave at 9:30? Or, the meeting may be over at 4 o'clock, but we can't come and pick you up till 6. Do we track that? Does the procedure lend itself to tracking that?
So I can respond to that through the chair. So it's something that's very difficult to track. We don't currently track that, and the reason behind that is because, as you may already know, 55% of our customers book their trips online. So a number of customers book online. So what happens online is, if you book a trip, you have the opportunity to say, you know what, I want it at 10, but actually, no, I want to change it to 9. Or maybe I don't want it at 9, let me change it to 11. It's hard for us to track that. So we don't track the amount of times, and then we don't know exactly why they're changing it. It could be personal preference, or it could have been because they didn't get the ride that they wanted, right? So it's because of those different parameters that are in the system.
They could input 10 a.m. and then it says not possible, pick another time. And that you wouldn't be able to track.
Right.
Okay, before moving a motion that's just going to set off a world of work, I'd rather, meet offline.
We can do that.
Just a point of order.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we can't, and I faced this myself where I wanted to do things that arise out of the ACAT minutes. We're not able to move a motion on an item that's here to be received.
I'm not going to. What I'm saying is I'm going to meet with staff offline before moving any motion in the regular meeting. Yeah.
Are we done? Okay, on to item 3. This is quite a happy event, but unfortunately we have a little bit of a sad footnote, which is that we're here to recognize the tremendous work that the members of ACAT who are retiring today have done. And I can tell you I've really enjoyed attending the meetings of the Accessibility Committee. I think they do a tremendous job, and we really owe them a debt of gratitude. But before I'd like to call out those who are here with us to get their award, I wanted to allow the board to reflect on the fact that our ACAT colleague, Tom Richardson, passed away last week. And he was an enthusiastic contributor to ACAT's advocacy for accessible transit. He had he had vision loss, hearing loss. He used a guide dog, but he educated staff and ACAT members about the impact of his disabilities in his life and helped us figure out how to make things better for people with guide dogs with his problems in the city. And we're grateful to him for that. Just to give some specific things that he did for us, he chaired the Service Planning Subcommittee. He was ACAT's representative on the TTC Customer Liaison Panel, which does a lot of good work. And I'd just like to thank Tom and tell his family that we are thinking of him. So for those who are able, I'd like to stand for a moment of silence to remember Tom. Thank you very much. Be seated. Now I'd like to be able to thank those who are here with us. I'd like to call on the retiring ACAT members, Mary Burton, Craig Nickel, Angela Ribeiro, who we just heard from, and Laurie Sue Robertson. You've done a great job representing the needs and concerns of the citizens of Toronto with disabilities and seniors who require public accessible transit in Toronto. I want to present each of you with a plaque and a certificate that will entitle you to a yearly transit pass, I think it is, equivalent to the number of years served during your term. Where are we going to do this? Down there? I think it's your...
Yeah, because I'll feed. Oh, duplicate. Sorry. So, one file going here. So I was to have a motion. I'll print.
Great. So thanks very much. We're going on to item number 4, which is an exciting presentation for the TTC. It's order.
So there's only 3 in attendance, so you're gonna.
Okay, I'll mention
They're
that.
gonna come up one at a time there.
Okay.
And then when you get back after that one, then you have to read the ones. I'd also like to congratulate the ones
Okay.
that couldn't. And it goes on to page 2. Couldn't make it.
So I have to tell you, one of the remarkable things to me is the long service employees we have of people who've dedicated their careers and their lives to our organization and their fellow citizens. And today, I'm pleased that we have with us 3 employees. One who served 40 years of TTC service, another 45, and the final one 50 years of service, which is a remarkable accomplishment in any life. I think these are all exceptional milestones. And I know that the board and the city are grateful to these individuals for the service that they've given to our city. As I call each of your names, if you could come forward to get your 15 minutes of fame and a picture you can take home. We'd like to give you a certificate and the board's thanks and appreciation for your dedication to the TTC. So the first individual is Frank, and if I get this wrong, forgive me, Cinerari. So Frank started employment in 1979, and he was a slip clerk at the Bus Transportation Wilson Division. Yeah, sorry. And the next individual with 45 years of service is Nora Katazauskas, and her date of employment is 1974, and she's a forms coordinator and designer with the Customer Communications Division. So where is Nora's? And last but not least, the 50-year service award recipient, Robert Campbell, who's been with the TTC. And I think the board could use some advice from him because he's a signal technician, grade 1 subway infrastructure, and we certainly need advice on signals. Very well. Nice to meet you. So I'd also like to congratulate some employees who couldn't be with us today, but who also obtained the 40 and 45-year milestones in 2019. Brian Barnett, 1979, Processing Operator, Revenue Operations. Michael Hart, 1979, Rail Vehicle Analyst, Bus Maintenance and Shops. Mary Sapiano, 1979, Compensation Consultant, HR. Mike Piemontese, Director, Project Procurement, Materials Procurement, 1979. Cosmo Romeo, 1979, Project Controls Analyst, Project Management Office. Christopher Scoville, 1979, Electrician's Assistant, Subway Infrastructure. And finally, in the 45-year category, Robert White, 1974, Senior Construction Inspector, Construction. Let's have a big round of applause for all of them.
So for Rick, just right to
So we're on to the 5-year service plan. I know there's a lot of public interest on this matter, and we have a lot of deputants. And I'm looking, I think, for Kathleen Llewellyn Thomas to give us some
Yes.
insight into this matter. Or should we deal with deputants first?
If you want to deal with the debts first, sure.
Okay, sorry. So we'll just recast that. We'll start with deputations. So the first deputant is Alan Yule, someone well-known to this board. So Alan, we've got a lot of people, so I'm going to really hold you tight to the 5 minutes. So who's going to do the time?
My apologies, Mr. Chair. This report lists 41 pages of service requests, how they were submitted and how these assessments and their assessment status. Since I merely have 5 minutes, I'm only going to refer to 2 of these. As you may remember, the Keel 41 bus route was submitted by the board in September 24 of this year. It is currently being held for review for route structure and for traffic operations. On page 16, it talks about a Kipling direct route bus from Kipling Station to High Park Station. It was submitted by consultations and is currently not recommended. Some people may think why I think I can speak to these. I don't have a degree in route planning, but I do have a quarter century in retail logistics and operations. And well, moving things is moving things, whether it's a bus full of riders or a skid full of microwaves. You take the least congested route possible after putting the maximum number of units safely on the bus or the skid, and you try to make the least number of trips possible. TTC would likely call this the basics of route planning. I call it a Tuesday. So when I look at these reports, and the report says that Kipling Station to High Park Station is not expected to attract sufficient numbers of new customers compared to the resources required to deliver the service. This is not a new route. It was the old existing 30 Lambert route that was amputated. So this report implies that the original 30 Lambert route failed to attract sufficient number of customers compared to the resources required to deliver service. I realize that the new 40 Junction bus has only been in service since October, and I don't have all the data on the new route. That being said, the reports that I'm getting back say that the number of short turns are up on the new 40, as well as changeovers and other supervisory interventions are being done to get operators back to where they need to be at the end of their shifts. Along with the new 40 route was the 189 that was introduced as part of the October changes. This route travels along Keel Street from Bloor to almost St. Clair West. Now remember, the Keel 41 bus route is under review for traffic operations. To those board members who are geographically challenged by living east of Yonge, Keel Street runs from Bloor north to Steeles in the 416. It is at its narrowest and most congested point from Bloor to St. Clair West. In this section, we already run the 41, the 941, the 89, and the 989 buses. To this, we've added another route, the 189, to this insanely crowded portion of Toronto roadways. I would ask that the TTC review the Kipling Station to High Park Station rejected in this report, along with adjacent route changes done earlier this year in the next 6 months. This report also recommends creating 5 exclusive bus lanes. Well, I could speak to all 5, again, only 2 today. First of all, we should look at the Eglinton East Corridor, doing the Eglinton East Corridor first. Because of existing road infrastructure, it is the easiest to do, and Scarborough deserves it. Remember, if it were not for post-decision political interference, there'd be 2 LRTs running in Scarborough right now. Unlike BC's SkyTrain, we never bought new trains for our version of this Scarborough technology, and it stands Scarborough TTC riders have next to nothing. The other report line is the Finch East Corridor. With the completion of the Finch West LRT in 2023, it makes sense to extend this corridor to Finch West Station instead of Finch Station as mapped out in this report. This way we can offer passengers a faster TTC routing option from Finch and McCowan all the way to Humber College instead of interrupting their service in the middle. I'm glad to see this report includes enhanced streetcar network. I already have 2 routes ready, but we're waiting for the agenda item to come up on that one. This plan is priced out at $791 million. By the time we get around to it in 10 to 15 years, that cost will be closer to $1 billion. Add this to the almost $24 billion to complete the CIP report from earlier this year. And if we want to complete projects like East Eglinton extension of Line 5 or the Waterfront LRT, that's going to cost us a few billion more. It is time to have a grown-up conversation about how we're going to improve and expand and fund transit in Toronto. We have another $30 billion to raise over the next 10 years. I'm asking politicians in this room to take this report, the CIP report from January of this year, and LRT expansion things to determine the cost over the next 10 to 15 years. Once these options are costed out, we need to develop a dedicated set of revenue tools to fund transit expansion during the next year from 2020 to 2021. These funds would be solely dedicated to transit expansion and operations in Toronto. These potential revenue tools could be taken to a referendum in 2022. Since TTC is a member of APTA, it already has access to this report on how to do successful transit referendums. Los Angeles is using a referendum to help fund its expansion of its transit network. This is not a warm and fuzzy request. Failing to invest in our city will cost us as a city billions of dollars in lost tax revenue, and businesses.
Alan, you're over now. You got to wrap it up.
Last slide. Sorry, sir. With apologies to the Commissioner McKelvey, the East Eglinton LRT line extension has been basically shovel-ready through 3 mayors and 5 TTC chairs. Without other transit funding sources, it will remain so for many more mayors and TTC chairs. It's time to get around to it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any questions for Mr. Yule? Councillor Karygiannis? No. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood that. Okay, no questions. Thank you very much, sir. Adam Cohon.
Hey, what I wanted to say, and I looked at the report and anything you sent, and I found it a little hard to figure out. So this is already being looked at. Thank you. But my question for you guys is, if the subway line is overcrowded, especially on the Young line, and the Bloor line is getting that way. First of all, why isn't it looked into to run the 97 bus all the way down Yonge? It runs basically from Davisville to Steeles basically all the time anyway, and it only runs downtown during rush hour. And for people that, and when I've ridden it during rush hour, it's got pretty good numbers. I would like to see the numbers if that bus was actually run all day, because I know if people were given the option, they wouldn't run downstairs and cram themselves on like sardines. They would use a bus. And for people in wheelchairs that have trouble with the cabs and actually refuse to take the subway downtown, at least we'd have a north-south option to get around all day, most days. And it would also be interesting to actually look at running the same route that you run the Blue Night along Bloor Street 24 hours a day to at least test the numbers. Same thing. There's still gaps in the subway where we can't get on. And I know there's seniors and other individuals that probably don't want to go down underground that would be happy to go on a bus. And I I thought you were going to cut me down to 3 minutes, so that's all I have to say.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It was well said and succinct. Any questions for Mr. Cohen? No, thanks a lot, sir. Kaylee Tyson from Uniform, people who make our streetcars. Kaylee, you've got 5 minutes.
The first time. I work for Unifor, and I'm here on behalf of our union and the highly skilled members who are hardworking and have built all of the rolling stock actually operating on TTC tracks, including our streetcars. So last week, Mayor Tory finally announced his plan to sustain and extend the city building fund to address the state of good repair backlog on the TTC and as well for affordable housing. Can we just take a minute to recognize the hard work that so many people have done to get to this stage? Something that when I heard the news, I was thrilled as a resident of Toronto as well as a TTC rider. So we have one roadblock to purchasing these streetcars almost surmounted. Of course, council still has to approve this. But that's revenue. And now we need the second to be surmounted, and that is a timely order. Last week, Mayor Tory was on Metro Morning with Matt Galloway, and at the 7-minute mark in the interview, he stated, "We need new streetcars now. And we wholeheartedly agree for 2 reasons. The first reason is that TTC riders desperately need additional capacity on streetcar routes. Ridership on streetcar routes has increased since the original streetcar order was made more than a decade ago. Toronto's population is growing rapidly. We're currently the fastest growing city in North America. This trend is likely to continue. Currently, streetcars are overcrowded during rush hour, and there's too much time and space between them. This leaves TTC riders, including myself, with unpredictable commutes and an inability to get to work or social gatherings in a timely or predictable manner. 2, the plant where these streetcars are built is at risk of closing without a timely order. The transportation equipment industry is inherently cyclical with peaks and valleys as orders are received and product is delivered. This is something our members at the Thunder Bay plant are used to, though not necessarily happy with at all. However, at the current moment, there is not enough work at the plant to keep the facility open past the end of 2020. Without additional orders now, the TTC and Ontario may lose the one plant that currently is able to meet the requirements of the TTC streetcar system, a system which I understand is one of the most challenging in the world to build for. The facility also delivers significant economic benefit to the city and the province through creating and sustaining good jobs right here in Ontario. Many of those would be in the GTA. You'll see in the written materials that we provided, I have more copies if anyone wants one, that the Bombardier facility in Thunder Bay supports an additional 1.5 to 2.8 jobs in the rest of the province through its supply chain, many of them likely right here in the Greater Toronto and surrounding area. Furthermore, we know Canadian content is important to you. It's important to us too. For years, it has been a public policy goal that government procurement lead to economic benefit in the jurisdiction where the tax revenue used to make these procurements is collected. The Ontario government, the City of Toronto, and the TTC have met these goals by implementing Canadian content rules, requiring all new rolling stock to include 25% Canadian content. Bombardier meets these requirements today with no additional research or RFPs required. New procurement guidelines established under the Canada-EU Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement aim to restrict some of the flexibility that Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto have when establishing Canadian content rules for future transit orders. However, nothing in the CETA prevents the city from commissioning additional streetcar purchases from Thunder Bay as an extension of the existing order. This avenue, we believe, should be taken to avoid delays in meeting the city's urgent transit need while also meeting those Canadian content requirements. Letting the plant close will have a 2-pronged effect. We will no longer be able to meet those Canadian content requirements, and we will prolong the amount of time before we will see those streetcars actually enter into service. In the 5-year service plan, the board has outlined purchasing additional streetcars beginning in 2022. The need for these additional streetcars was actually first identified all the way back in 2013 and identified as urgent again in 2018. We believe that you need to order these streetcars actually in 2020, so pull that order up from 2022 to now. You got it. And to ensure that we can meet the dual policy goals of ensuring Canadian content and meeting the stringent requirements of Ontario's streetcar network. Thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
Since you're the person here from Thunder Bay, so I don't know if
I'm representing them. Yeah.
I don't know if they're questions that you can answer, but I think there's some misunderstanding. You'd like to see us pull this order up. Is it that this is the last business and that's it? Or is it that there's a gap between now and orders that might come for other types of vehicles in other cities?
Good question. What I understand is there are 2 orders that are coming to the end at the same time. One is the completion of the streetcar order, and another is the bi-levels for Metrolinx. There has been an additional
you make those
order.
as well.
Yeah, and there has been an additional order for those from Metrolinx that came in September. That will take us to keeping the plant open until the end of 2020, but nothing after that at this point.
Okay, but there are no, that we know of, there are no complaints about those types of vehicles. And now that we resolved the issues earlier on in the order, there aren't huge complaints about the vehicles here either. Are vehicles similar to the ones that we would be ordering if we ordered? Are there vehicles similar to that being used elsewhere in the world? If the plant was to stay open, is it reasonable to expect that other orders may come in the future, and thus we'd be keeping this business going indefinitely, not just for the length of time it takes to do our order?
So the cars that are built at the Thunder Bay facility include the streetcars as well as the Toronto Rocket and then the bi-levels for Metrolinx. Any of those 3 would be cars that then would be built at the Thunder Bay facility, from what I understand right now, and then any other additional orders for similar vehicles could potentially be put there through Bombardier.
Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, so last question then, that is, the rocket comes from there as well. We know that we do have near future needs for those as well.
Absolutely.
If this plant closes down, how complicated would it be to open it back up to create rockets if we wanted to order the rockets from the same place?
So I will start answering this conversation or this question by saying I am not a streetcar
Right.
or manufacturing expert, but I did speak with our members and the president of our local in Thunder Bay earlier this week, and he mentioned the length of time it can take in order to rebuild the line at a manufacturing facility. So the sooner those orders can come through before the line is taken down, then we don't have to rebuild it again.
Right.
And
Once you sandbag it, you have to rebuild.
Yeah.
Okay.
That reduces then the length of time it will take to deliver those additional cars.
So it could then delay not only streetcars, but our subway car as well.
Potentially. We'd have to ask further questions about that, but potentially.
Sure. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Karagianis.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Unifor representative, thank you for coming to talk to us today. What other cities in North America is Bombardier doing business with?
Again, a question I do not have the answer to at this time. We should get maybe a Bombardier.
Well, are you familiar?
There are streetcars and subway cars operating in many different cities across North America.
Let me just try to rephrase it.
Okay.
Do you know of any other cities that we might be doing business with, or we're building streetcars and subways for? I mean, on the line?
On the line in Thunder Bay?
Yes.
Not at this moment, no.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's all.
That it? Okay. Any further questions? Thanks very much for coming. Raymond Shen. Mr. Shen, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The 5-year service plan has 5 pillars of opportunity. Pillar 1, enhance the transit network, describes the service impact in introducing the Line 5's Eglinton Crossway. It should stress that the service plan relies on a serious map 4 of the official plan to improve service. Pillar 3 is improve service reliability. I quote directly, customers consistently selected service reliability as the most important action in the 5-year service plan. Late and irregular service adversely affects customer experience by adding to wait times, crowding, and trip duration, end quote. Bus bunching is a common complaint in the public feedback to the 5-year plan. In my Deputation 12 is now being reassigned. It comes later, but I refer to it that in that deputation, I would be referring to the fact that measuring bus on-time performance at every stop, not just at the terminal, will give a better measure of passenger service. Pillar 3 should acknowledge that service will be improved when formal procedures are set up to identify and remedy bus bunching. While bunching is an operational issue, there are strategic aspects to the solution. One strategic approach is to plan a network of high-order transit routes that makes for improved service. I don't know how the public transit projects are coordinated through the different layers of the city government. The TTC has produced the 5-year service plan. City planning has drafted the transportation policy of the official plan for the February City Council meeting. Map 5 of the official plan, which I have here, but I don't know if the screen is working. This is map 5 of the official plan, is the enhanced surface transit network. The map, does it work? Thank you. And then this is the next one, map 4 of the express bus transit lanes of the 5-year service plan does not correspond at all to map 4 of the official plan. This suggests that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. There were 2 councillors who sit on the TTC board, both the TTC board and the Planning, Housing Committee. They are well aware of the importance of map 4 and 5 of the official plan. No project can be undertaken unless it is defined on these maps of the official plan. A network of high-order transit can reduce bunching. Bus routes are not just too long, such as the Shepherd and Lawrence routes, thank you, and cannot maintain even spacing. High-order transit routes should be considered to replace some of the long bus routes. The Shepherd East LRT comes to mind, and also the French Crosstown LRT. Pillar 5, again, enhance the transit network, describes the service impact of the introduction of Line 5, the Eglinton Crosstown. Map 4 of the official plan, I think it shows here. All right, so we defines the high-order transit projects for the city. Few of the routes on map 4 take into account the benefits sought in Pillar 1. Pillar 1 should stress that the service plan relies on a strategic map 4 to improve service, not the current map 4, which is an anemic collection of lines. A weak strategic plan makes a pointless service plan. In conclusion, Pillar 3 should acknowledge that service will be improved when formal procedures are set up to identify and remedy bus bunching. Pillar 3 should stress that the service plan relies on a strategic map for the official plan to improve service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shander. Just wait 1 second. We might get a question.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Mr. Hamish Wilson. Mr. Wilson, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, and thank you. There's a lot of good work in here. Thank you very much, and let's hope that we get a lot of it happening. One issue with the discussion, however, is it doesn't mean to say that we can't be very worried about the equity issues, but how we're defining equity is missing what I call carism, the systemic discrimination by mode of transport, and it is a very real issue if you're a vulnerable road user, and the hidden subsidies, the hidden harms, or the not so hidden harms, they're pretty embedded in much of the way that we do things. It costs us a lot. If I can get an overhead here, this is from February, anyway, 1996. From Vancouver, we realized that the public subsidy enjoyed by the private automobile amounts to $2,700 per automobile per year, or about 7 times the amount we subsidize public transit. That's a really significant amount of money. And if we had a vehicle registration tax of $300 each, a third for the police force to enforce the traffic laws, a third for road repair, a third for the transit expansion and maintenance, that would go a long way to actually...
Just 1 second, Mr. Wilson. Point of order. Oh, sorry, you have a question for him later. Okay, great. Sorry, keep going.
Yes. So in terms of finding the money for doing all of this good stuff and other good things, having a vehicle registration tax would be an excellent thing to do, and hopefully the councillors that are on the commission will take this forward. Perhaps the commission itself could make a motion to get this happening. The private vehicles are also heavy on the space consumption. So in terms of equity of the use of the road space, pardon the darkness of this, a single occupant vehicle, the person is carcooned versus the crowded transit and the crowded bike and the this and that. So the equity of road space use is another thing. We also have a bit of an inequity in standards, I think, in that if we, I didn't bring down the Toronto Star editorial from a couple of years back, but they were figuring that if all the ridership forecasts for the Scarborough Subway Extension are brought in, all the riders materialize and the thing gets built, it'd be at a cost of about $1.5 million each new rider. That's a lot of money versus what is happening perhaps with all the new riders that will come in with this service expansion. So we have to think high about what we can actually do. If the threshold is $1.5 million for a new ride, then let's go. Money should not be a problem. Also, with the inequities on road, cyclists are often harmed. Notice of hazard again about the streetcar tracks in the core of the city. You need to fix up the margins, especially on that. If you're doing the busways, the express busways, please let's do it. Start with Eglinton. But also make sure, please, that there's room somewhere for the cyclists to have a degree of safety, please. What else? Where am I here in my notes? Yes, boosting bikes in the city as well, especially in the core. That's another way of having equitable approach to mobility. Specifically, say, Bloor Danforth, which is moving along again. We were going to have it studied however many years ago, and that study got axed. We are beginning to see some movement again, missing the key gap on Bloor Street East between Sherbourne and Church, but let's hope that happens soon. In terms of actually providing bikeway relief on the Danforth, I've been thinking let's do a bi-directional bike lane on the north side with a reversible Jarvis-style
Mr. Wilson, I would say I'm not sure that, unfortunately, it might be a good idea if we had an integrated transit model, but we don't. And we don't have any authority over where bicycle lanes are put. So if you get back to the service plan, I know you've got good ideas on it, and I'd like to hear them.
Well, my sense is, sir, that you have a severe overload of the subway system as well, and you need as much relief as possible, as soon as possible. If you get back to the overload on the subway, if the Danforth gets extended, it's going to be even harder on the overcrowded transit. And if you're actually, just because you have things that are not in the official plan, that's not an excuse to not look at it, I think, because I'm not sure entirely as to the facts of this, but I don't think the Shepherd subway was in an official plan. I'm not sure about the Scarborough extension being in an official plan, and I'm not sure that the Scarborough subway extension was in an official plan either. With many of the... Yes, okay, well... there's an awful lot that could be done. Let's hope that we can actually do it. We have a climate emergency that should allow for new ideas to bubble up through. Thank you.
through you to the deputy, and I really appreciate you coming down to be deputized. And I will say to you that it's not something that we'd like to say, be it this, that, or the other person regarding the name. I mean, this was something that, it's not the Scarborough extension, it's the Vaughan extension, although some people might, and myself included, want to agree with you. However, my question is the following. You quoted 2,700, and that was from Vancouver, I believe?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so do you have a similar number for Toronto? I mean, has your group done any work? Have you asked the author to see what the subsidy will be in Toronto? Because the Vancouver dimensions of traffic and the Toronto dimensions of traffic are quite different.
It's a very different world in some ways. I agree that's an issue, sir. This is now a couple of decades old. So to do something like this in Toronto, I think it'd be a very good idea. It would cost a certain amount of money to actually do such a thing. But there are also a range of other studies in other parts of North America that indicate a similar, like the $2,700 is like a mid-range estimate of what avoided costs and subsidies are. And if anything, it's probably gone up from 1996, from when this $2,700 was described. And at the top here, there's a pair of researchers, Newman and Kenworthy, in an appendices. They said that, yeah, trying to find out the actual costs of cars, it's very, very convoluted and difficult because things are layered. They're very layered, if not obscured.
Is there such a figure for the cost of bicycles on the road? I mean, there's got to be, bicycles might not be costing as much, but they certainly are costing something.
The leaders in many of the road economic policies tend to be in Europe, and many of them are now paying cyclists. So in terms of the overall societal benefit, including the health benefits, the bikes, they don't wear out the pavement. They can hurt people when they get run into, and they can kill some pedestrians sometimes. But overall, you won't find, I think you'll find if you did the transport economics, the bikes are actually, should be paid.
But you agree with me that there's a cost for the bicycle lanes? There's a cost for us having the bikes on the road?
Oh, well, sometimes there are absolutely costs. I can't say that there aren't, no.
But do you have those numbers?
I can make sure that you get some info on bike economics at some point, sir.
Honestly, I mean, and you agree with me, and you might just want to disagree, but there's no free lunch. It doesn't matter if you've got a bicycle, it doesn't matter if you're a pedestrian, it doesn't matter if you're a car. If you're a pedestrian, the sidewalk needs to be looked after from year to year to year. If there's any heaves, so you don't stumble. If you're a bicyclist, that the roads have to be paved. I know that there's colleagues here that are adamant cyclists, and they advocate for the sidewalks, for the bicycle lanes to be cleaned out. And the cars, like you mentioned the figure. So everything is there. So if you can share those numbers with me or with the committee, if you ever get them, that would be greatly appreciated.
If I may just take a little bit more of the committee's time, commission's time, here's a bit of indicator on efficiencies.
Answer to Mr. Karagiannis' comments, please proceed.
Here's a hint about the relative efficiency of mode or efficiency of road space by mode of transport. The cars tend to be the worst, and if the public has paid for the cost of the road and they are public assets, then we have to be more efficient, including bikeways and transitways. From NACTO.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Wilson. Any further questions? Thanks for your presentation, sir. Brenda Thompson, Scarborough Transit Action. I wanted to thank Scarborough Transit Action for providing us with a letter, because it's always helpful. So just you can look at your list of deputations. A letter from Scarborough Transit Action is attached. I should have mentioned as well that Unifor provided us with a letter, and I didn't see it because it didn't use Unifor letterhead. So if I'd been clearer on that, I would have directed people to that. Please proceed.
Thank you, Vice Chair Heisey and TTC Commission.
Thank
you for the opportunity to speak, and I'm also would like to thank CTC staff, Mark Mize and Stephanie Simard, who came out to the public consultation in Scarborough that we had on the TTC 5-year plan. And Scarborough Transit Action supports this plan. We feel that bus-only lanes and signal priority are a cost-effective way to improve transit. In particular, I just wanted to point out, it's difficult to read here, but this is from an earlier TTC report, which lists all the high ridership corridors in Toronto, and the ones that are highlighted in blue are the bus routes in Scarborough. And we have two of the highest ridership routes in the city. And then we also have York Mills, Shepherd East, and Lawrence East. And some of these routes have a higher ridership than the existing streetcars downtown. And so I'd like to take the opportunity to ask you to think about bus rapid transit, as well as bus-only lanes and signal priority for some of our busy routes, like the Finch East and the Eglinton East, Morningside, and Meadowvale. This does not preclude higher order transit from being built, but it does give us maybe a quicker way to improve ridership and to deal with some of the traffic congestion and the long travel times we have in Scarborough. I'd also like to make a pitch for bus-only lanes and signal priority. In New York, the subway stopped running. I apologize for the lack of clarity of these pictures, but the subway stopped running and they were able to get a bus-only lane up and running in 24 hours. And these white strips here are the tops of buses. Basically what they did was they put pylons along the side of the road to keep the bus lanes open for buses. That was done in 24 hours, so I think it would be possible for us to do something similar very quickly in places like Scarborough, where we're very heavily dependent on buses. Also, signal priority, that was put forward in Montreal, and they're now planning to do more. They've got 55 signal priority intersections for buses in the island. So that's another thing that we could do very quickly if we had the will to sort of put it forward and prioritize it. I'd also like to just bring up again the fact that we did declare a climate emergency. There is a climate emergency. Toronto is a member of C40 Cities, which is trying very hard to combat climate change from an urban, dense urban sort of position of a large city. And in Paris, they aim to cut automobile traffic by 50%, and they've already done so significantly by reallocating space to transit lanes, protected bicycle lanes, pedestrianized streets and plazas, and most famously by creating a linear park along the River Seine. So these actions are very popular with the people, and they're well received. And I hope that we can do something similar across Toronto. And I thank you for your time. We do have a list of asks that we're hoping we can get going right away with regard to some of the Scarborough heavily traveled routes, like Eglinton East, Morningside, Meadowvale, Finch East, Shepherd East, Lawrence East, Markham Road, and also York Mills. I'm not sure what's happening with the Ellesmere BRT that Metrolinx is building, but maybe it's possible to get some bus-only lanes along there in the short term. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Karagianis has a question for you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Deputy for coming to speak to us. Are you advocating Finch East to be a BRT lane?
I think we should look at it. It's got the highest ridership of all the bus routes in the city.
So, if I'm not mistaken, you're advocating for something like between 4 and 6, or you're advocating for the whole day that Finch East has a BRT line?
Sorry, I understand there's the Finch West LRT on the.
You're not saying about Finch East?
So I'm talking about Finch East.
Right. So Finch East, are you advocating for a BRT?
Yes.
So this would be something which is permanent, or only during rush hours?
No, a BRT, bus rapid transit, is permanent.
Okay, so that would be would your idea be that we take one of the 2 lanes out from Finch and dedicate it as a BRT?
If that was considered necessary, yes. If not, it could be widened. I'm I'm not, to be honest, I'm not familiar
Okay,
with the
but
number of lanes on.
what is your ask? I mean, I'm not sure if you've been on Finch, but Finch has 2 lanes each way. Is your ask that we add an extra lane, or is your ask that we take one of the 2 lanes out and use it as a dedicated bus lane?
Okay.
I mean, you bring it forward, and I just,
Yes,
representing half
Thank
of
you.
Finch, I'd like to know what your ask is.
If it's possible, sometimes it's possible to narrow the existing lanes so that you can actually have rapid transit or a bus in an additional lane. But sometimes you can't do that because you've only got 4 lanes, so you would have to add a lane. And I don't know which would be the best solution, but
Okay, so let me ask this question. Have you been up on Finch to take a look?
not for a while.
It hasn't changed since you were up last
No,
up there.
it hasn't.
So at the time that you were up there, can we narrow those lanes? Do you think that we can narrow those lanes?
I'm not a transit expert in that field. I mean, it would have to be something that the transit experts would look
Will you disagree with me if I were to tell you that we cannot narrow the lanes, and if we need to add a BRT on Finch, we'll need to add an extra lane? Would you just? Okay. What would the cost of that be? Would you be? Okay. Well, all right. I thank you for your ideas and that you brought forward. Thank you very much.
Councillor Carroll.
So to be
Just
clear.
1 second, I think you've got some more interest.
Oh, Brenda, yeah, just a couple of questions.
People were listening.
So just to clarify, you're not proposing a particular design with any of the things you've suggested. You're just saying these are things that Scarborough Transit Action Network would like to have looked at, kind of similar to the 79 that are looked at here.
Yes.
Okay. And are you okay with, I'm going to be asking questions about this later, but
Yes.
now that we're getting into this 5-year plan, and then each year, based on motions that have come forward, we can take a relook. So what it means, in my understanding of the report, is that going forward, when we ask for something to be looked at, there's sort of a rationale for then annually answering all of them, recommended, not recommended. So you would just like through the year before 2021 for certain things to be looked at?
Yes, and with regard to BRT, with the bus-only lanes in the signal priority, I'm asking that be done now, because I think we can do it now.
So if we, in our questions of staff, find out that that's not necessarily something that can be done quickly, but that they will look at it, as long as it's loaded into the hopper, that's progress.
Yes.
Okay. Some of the things that you mentioned suggested, bus signaling, changing the signing so there's a priority and turning restrictions around buses only, those sorts of things. While they seem quick and easy, they require a fair amount of interface with city transportation.
Yeah.
You would allow that we can take that time as well. So again, things might have to find their way to the 2021 plan, but as long as we're committed to doing that, and there's a more regularized procedure to adding things that would provide ridership growth, you would see progress.
I would definitely see progress.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further? No, you're not quite done. I'm sorry. You've given us a lot of food for thought. So Councillor McKelvey would like to pursue some questions.
Thank you, Brenda. I just want to be crystal clear because it's come up a few times. So one of the recommendations that's in this plan is to look at exclusive bus lanes along Finch Avenue East and the Eglinton Avenue East corridor. So Scarborough Transit Action thinks that's a good idea.
Yes.
Okay. And in addition, you've also pointed out that Shepherd and Lawrence have some of the highest riderships in the city, so you would also like that we had a look at if there was a way to improve bus service on those corridors as well.
Yes.
And I just want to be clear again, Scarborough Transit Action still supports the Eglinton East LRT being constructed from Kennedy Station to Malvern.
We 100% support the Eglinton East LRT, and we see BRT as a way to pave the way for.
Okay. And so similarly, the Durham BRT line along Ellesmere, that's also something supported by Scarborough Transit Action. So your overall goal is to get people moving to where they need to go faster and easier and get it done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
I think that's it. Thanks a lot.
very much.
I think I saw Councillor Perks in the back there, and he did ask to speak, so I'd like to give him his 5 minutes. Well, you made that decision. There was some editorial by Councillor Carroll, which we'll ignore, and we'll let you proceed, Councillor Perks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the TTC board. The staff who prepared this report very graciously set up a couple of briefings so that members of Toronto City Council could ask them questions and get into the details of it so that we could understand the implications for the other decisions we make at Council. During that briefing, I learned a number of things that I wanted to share with you. The first thing that I learned is that as ambitious as this plan is, all it does is keep up with population growth. At the end of the 5 years, if you implement everything in this plan, the City of Toronto will have the same mode share as it does today. This doesn't get us ahead of the curve, and you need to be mindful of that as you look at your fleet plan, as you look at your operating asks for the City of Toronto, and as you develop the out years of the plan as it comes back to you. What you have in front of us today just keeps up. It doesn't get us to where we need to be. The second thing that I learned is that the plan rests on three assumptions. The first assumption is that the Scarborough RT continues to function uninterrupted for at least 5 years. I leave that with you. The second is it assumes that you purchase 90 additional buses. And third, it assumes that you purchase 60 additional streetcars. As a reminder, neither those 90 buses or 60 streetcars are in the current capital plan as approved by Toronto City Council. I want to underscore that because on Monday you will be considering your budget ask. And in that budget ask, if you want to merely keep up with population growth in the City of Toronto, you must include those additional 90 buses and additional 60 streetcars. On the streetcars, I asked some further questions. I asked, is it possible, when do the streetcars have to start arriving for this plan to be implemented? And I was told 2022. I asked, is it possible for any supplier other than Bombardier to be able to deliver you streetcars that can run on our infrastructure by 2022 if you go to an open tender? And I was told no. And further, not only is it impossible for them to arrive by 2022, you would have to construct new maintenance facilities, you would have to have new parts warehouses, you would have to train staff on entirely new vehicles. You heard earlier from a representative of Unifor on some of the risks associated to that Thunder Bay plant if you defer the decision. There is a further risk that you didn't hear about. I've spoken to people who work on the line there, and I've spoken to Bombardier staff as well. The further risk is that the people who work in the Thunder Bay plant are highly skilled tradespeople. It's not something you just put an ad in the newspaper for to be able to assemble a light rail or streetcar or subway vehicle. It's very, very skilled tradesmanship. If that stops operating, those skilled tradespeople will be snapped up by people manufacturing vehicles elsewhere in the world in a heartbeat. In other words, if that plant is idle for any length of time, it will not come back. You have one window. You have one window to do the things that are described in this plan. And that window comes to you on Monday when you tell the City of Toronto you need those 60 streetcars, you need those 90 buses. As a final thought, before I ran for office, I spent 15 years as a transit activist. Think of me as sort of a poor man's Steve Monroe. I have watched a lot of commissions come and go. And the successful commissions are the ones who stood up to Toronto City Council and made it plain to us what we need to do to have the transit system that is the backbone and lifeblood of the City of Toronto. Implementing this plan fully, getting the vehicles you need to implement this plan fully, is the minimum that you can do to live up to the reputation of some of the great commissions we've had over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Any questions for Councillor Perks? Okay. Well, there may be some questions. There may be questions of staff. Thank you very much. The next speaker is John Bossens, and we also have a letter from him. He's a professor of economics. Hi, John. 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair Heisey and members. I'm basically here to do two things. First of all, I want to applaud the work that your staff has done in bringing this 5-year plan forward. It's really important that we go back to a regime of longer-term planning, and this plan moves us significantly in that direction. However, having said that, I also want to say that I think the plan is inadequate and not sufficiently ambitious. Inadequate not because of a lack of analysis, but rather because of the need we have in Toronto. I want to make 4 points. Actually, I want to make 5 points. First of all, one of the reasons why we are facing even more of a problem than I think you realize is that Toronto's population is growing faster than was expected. The plan before you assumes a population growth rate of 1% over the next 5 years. In fact, Toronto's population grew in the last year by 2.8%, which is phenomenal. An indication of two things: of the increase in immigration into Canada, the attractiveness of Toronto to immigrants for many reasons, economic and social, and finally because of provincial policies which are trying to redirect growth from greenfield areas into Toronto. All of those things are having the effect of increasing the rate of growth of population in Toronto. I put some numbers in here. I mean, it's anybody's guess as to what the exact rate of population growth will be over the next 5 years. But if it ends up being something on the order of 2.5% instead of 1%, we're talking about another more than 300,000 people that are going to be potential riders for the system. We have to plan for that growth. I would echo Gordon Perks' comments on the need to accelerate streetcar and bus acquisition. I think that's important, but there are other points I want to make. First, on the need, there's a need, I think, for better ridership metrics. Too many people assume that because fare revenues have gone down, that ridership has gone down. I think that is not true. I think there is a number of reasons why ridership has gone up while fare revenues have gone down. The increased use of monthly passes, the free second rides feature, problems in getting people to pay using the new Presto card. These are issues on the revenue side that should not make us shy away from realizing that ridership is growing and ridership is pressed because we have a capacity problem throughout the system. There's a need for surface transit improvements. All I can say in that is that, again, the 5-year plan is not ambitious enough. Out of the 174 million in total operating costs over the next 5 years as an increment, only 67 million, $14 million a year, is incremental for surface transit. The rest is basically stuff that we're stuck with, bringing lines 5 and 6 into operation. So $14 million a year is not a lot. The effectiveness of surface transit improvements potentially, such as express bus lanes, priority signals, etc., those are valuable. There's a high benefit cost to them. We should be moving ahead with those faster and putting more money into that. There's a need for more and faster action in relieving Line 1 congestion. I'll just simply say on that is that I think all the estimates that are projected are overly optimistic. Again, we not only have a faster than expected rate of population growth, we also have a piling up of a lot of that into the young corridor, which is receiving a more than proportionate increase in population. This is going to be exacerbated by the extension of the Young Line to Richmond Hill, which will probably contribute enough additional passengers to offset the gains that will come from opening up the Ontario line. I put some recommendations here before you in the letter. My message is simply this: we need more money invested in transit, and I urge you to press for that in the upcoming budget and over the next 5 years. Thank you.
So you were endorsing the comments around looking at some of the vehicle enhancement, vehicle buys that Councillor Perks mentioned earlier. If we were to stick to this plan, but to take some of those things that are listed in the capital part of the plan, but listed as unfunded, and press right now for those to be some of the first things funded by the mayor's new city building levy if it passes in February. Are the things recommended in this plan to make use of those new vehicles, that if we bought them, are those to your liking?
Absolutely. I mean, okay. It's up to you as commission and staff to figure out how best to allocate that across the system, but there's just no question, I think.
We need to ask to earmark it now.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think we need action now on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Further questions? Nope. Thanks a lot, Mr. Boston. The next speaker is Andy Gort from Fontra, and there is again another written deputation from that organization that you can review.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the TTC board. My name is Andy Gort, and I represent the Federation of North Toronto Residents Associations, and we are basically representing a number of RAs, about 30 RAs from the Young Corridor and then into Bathurst and to Don Mills along Eglinton. The first thing I would like to do is I would like to congratulate TTC staff and management and you as board members for commissioning this study. I think there is a couple things that are really outstanding about this study. I got more and more enthusiastic as I participated. First one is the fact that this is the first time the creation of a 5-year plan, that the consultation was very, very professional and very open, a very wide scope of the study with a unique focus on TTC surface transit, your organization of the study around 5 pillars and the 20-point action plan, and concluding with a budget. So I would like to congratulate on a really good, solid plan. That doesn't mean that we don't have any suggestions or points. I think the linkage, there's a strong linkage between transit and housing, and I think that's something that our comments are based on. Housing doesn't live in a vacuum. Without having connectivity and the possibility to mobility for surface transit mobility, for instance, is a key enabler to connect difficult to reach Toronto neighborhoods to employment, shopping, and learning destinations. If you improve service transit, you will indirectly or directly improve housing desirability, availability, and indirectly housing affordability in Toronto. There is a ton of money going, hopefully, to improve the housing situation in Toronto, but without the mobility and providing for that mobility, you're still going to get landlocked residents that can't get to employment opportunities, which typically are not in their areas. And that's really the basis of our comments. So the first one is, we really think that you have a winner with your 5 bus transit lanes, and we would recommend strongly that you accelerate those and you get those up and running much faster than what you're showing in this plan. The costs are not huge compared to all these other budgets. So that would be the first recommendation. The second one, which is now already a refrain, is your budget right now you're showing is only 5% funded, and I think compared to all the other budgets and how complementary this is, I think you should ask for 100% funding for this budget. And the third one is there are a number of small initiatives, as John Boston's pointed out. They don't amount to a huge amount of money. I think they have a huge benefit, and I think if you can accelerate those based on pilot results, then you should be asking more money for those smaller initiatives that you have in the plan. The last one is a more local one for our area. With the new line, the Eglinton LRT, there's going to be a lot of rejigging of bus lines, and we're looking forward to wide consultation with the community to make sure that all those bus lines get realigned properly. The last point that we would like to make is, I think you've got a great study on the go, so why stop here? You know that many of the people that will benefit from the improved service transit then have to transfer onto the subway system. The subway no longer is under threat of being uploaded to the City of Toronto, and there are lots of issues on those lines in terms of crowding. So we would like to suggest that you follow on this study with another study that focuses on the Yonge corridor and the Bloor and Danforth corridor, and use the same framework as this study and set up a 5-year service plan and 10-year outlook for the Yonge corridor transit and for the Bloor Danforth transit to follow after this study. It would fit perfectly within another relief subway line showing up, and I think the next 10 years are going to be very difficult for those lines, and it would create a great framework to basically look at those transportation routes in the same manner as you did for the surface ones. So that's basically our comments, and thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Gord? Thank you so much, sir. Milan Tiveldi. And I hope I said that properly.
You did, but I have to confess that I am not Milan Tiveldi. My colleague Milan couldn't be here. My name is Sean Maher, and I have been for the last 48 hours the acting executive director of Ttc Riders during Sheila Pitziallen's leave. I know we all wish her well, and I will do my best to be an adequate fill-in for her today. And I want to raise with you 3 concerns about the service plan that come from our members who are your customers. And the first is that it's a stand-pat service plan. We recognize that there are constraints in this world, but we also think that we should face the realities of the environment we're in, even when we accept those constraints. I can't tell the tale of capital requirements and service purchase order windows as eloquently as the representatives from Unifor and Councillor Perks did. But I can speak to the impact on our members. One of the most important commodities when it comes to transit ridership, as everyone here knows, what we see in surveys and in studies that we find regularly is that the worst thing for transit ridership, even worse than knowing it will take you a long time to get somewhere on transit, is not knowing how long it will take you to get somewhere on transit. And in an environment where we have increasing numbers of service disruptions and outages, a stand-pat service plan is a very, very risky thing for this corporation. The second concern we have is that even that stand pat service plan is not fully funded. 95% of the costs required just to stand pat are not funded in the plan that we have in front of us. And that means that in addition to the announcement that you made last week about an increase in planned outages, we will see an increase in unplanned outages. And when that happens, when streetcars fail and subways stop and the SRT has a bad day, what do we deploy to fix that problem? We deploy our buses. And that brings me to the third concern, which is the bus transit network. That this service plan explores gradually an expansion of bus transit networks and bus-only lanes when we're expecting, based on everything that we know, based on the stand-pat service plan and the fact that it's not fully funded, that we will need to deploy buses in a whole bunch of ways we haven't anticipated, and that ought to tell everyone in this room that we should be massively optimizing the efficiency of our bus system, which means not exploring bus-only lanes and exploring bus transit systems, but going whole hog, getting fully on board with that, expanding and accelerating the bus transit system and the bus-only lanes and the bus priority lanes. So our members are very concerned, A, about the notion that where we are is a sustainable place to be, B, that given that that's a challenge, we aren't even funding staying where we are, and C, recognizing that we aren't doing either of those things, we aren't doing the thing that we can readily do, which is optimize our bus system. Thank you.
Oh, I did accidentally. Where we were in your presentation time.
I apparently have 5 minutes left. So.
Yeah, no, you've
got 5 minutes to go.
Are there any questions for this gentleman? No? Thanks very much, sir. And our last deputant who is added, Eli Aaron, I believe.
Thank you. My name is Eli Aaron, and I am the budget lead at the Toronto Youth Cabinet, our city's youth advisory body. The Toronto Youth Cabinet participated in the second stakeholder meeting and provided comments on the draft action plan. The TTC's 5-year service plan is of incredible importance to Toronto's youth, as public transit accounts for almost half of all trips taken by youth in our city. There are many important initiatives included in the service plan, but I am going to focus on the transit priorities section. The TTC operates many of the busiest bus routes in Canada or the United States, some carrying over 40,000 passengers a day. Buses carry the largest proportion of TTC trips, yet Toronto has hardly any bus lanes.
Mr. Aaron, did you intend to have an exhibit up on the overhead?
I'm going to put it on in one
Okay,
moment.
sorry, I just saw part of it and I didn't want to be missing anything important.
When the TTC's high ridership bus routes get stuck in traffic, it can lead to longer travel times, bunched vehicles, and service gaps that can cause overcrowding. This can be frustrating for riders. Allowing buses to operate without being impacted by traffic congestion is a large part of the solution. Currently, our road network is primarily designed to move cars. Toronto's youth, specifically 13 to 24-year-olds, drive for only 9% of trips. A road network that prioritizes cars does not work for us. We have strongly supported transit priority in Toronto through our comments on this service plan, last year's TTC budget, the King Street Transit pilot, and meetings with members of the TTC board. There are concerns that reallocating space from private vehicles to buses will increase congestion. The TTC's crowding standard for an articulated bus is 77 people. Most cars in rush hour have one person. Toronto is already experiencing significant congestion, and it cannot be solved by prioritizing the private vehicle, because there will never be enough space for everyone to drive a car without traffic congestion. Over the next 12 years, 600,000 more people will move to Toronto, and there isn't enough room for 600,000 more cars in this city. We need to focus on moving people instead of cars. It is the only way we will improve mobility in the city. It's also a matter of equity. The evaluation of the Fare Pass showed that recipients of the city's low-income transit pass were more than twice as likely to take the bus than regular Presto cardholders. Many of the busiest routes where bus lanes are proposed serve equity-seeking communities. The city's poverty reduction strategy states that neighborhoods experiencing poverty are largely concentrated in the inner suburbs and tend to be highly racialized. I'm going to put this up here now. Located with limited access to the rapid transit system, these communities face barriers due to a lack of quick, reliable public transit. This map, which is, of course, David Hulchansky's 3 cities, shows in red low-income areas based on income from the census. And the black lines that I have drawn on there, on Jane, Dufferin, Steeles, Finch, and Eglinton East, show the proposed bus routes in the service plan, which significantly would benefit the low-income areas across our city. This bus lane plan is a chance to stand up for these communities and improve access to employment and education opportunities. This is a chance to give youth increased independence, improve the lives of seniors, low-income people, and others who do not have access to a car. This plan will vastly improve the commutes of 250,000 Torontonians, including youth, every day. This is a plan that increases mobility for equity-seeking groups and neighborhoods. This plan is ambitious, doable, and affordable. The bus lane plan before you today is the way forward to transform our transportation system. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Questions? Councillor Karygiannis?
Thank you, and appreciate you being here. Just want to go a little bit over your math. You said we're going to have how many people in the next 12 years?
600,000.
Does that translate to 600,000 cars?
If each person decides to drive.
Okay, but the 600,000 that will be coming into Toronto, they would be families. Some of them have children under the age of 16. Would I be correct?
Yes.
So when you put the families, 600,000, let's say a family usually will have 3 to 4, you're looking at about 100,000 families. And when people are coming in, they have some difficulty in obtaining the first car or a second car. So if I was to put it to you that maybe the math of 600,000 cars is a little bit off, will you disagree with me?
I can't say that I can project into the future how many of the new residents in Toronto will own a car 12 years from now. Okay, however, we know that when people are first settling in Toronto, they primarily settle in the inner suburban areas that have the worst transit access. And in many cases, people may not have a choice, and they may have to own a car if we don't provide adequate public transit, including bus lanes.
I appreciate the answer. However, that does not go back to the question that I put forward to you, that it's not going to be, you said 600,000 cars. I would say to you, usually about 100,000, maybe 150. And because if you take the family, the nucleus family, there's 4 people, you divide that 600,000 by 4, that's 150,000. And usually people will have a hard time getting a car when they're coming in. So over the years, I think maybe your math could be a little off. And I think that, you know, the presentation of 600,000 cars might not be right. Disagree? Agree?
I think he's answered the question as best he can.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
He's been fair. Councillor Carroll.
So you're at the end of a list of people today who have said, yes, we want dedicated bus lanes. That's really a change. That's been a difficult thing to do in the past. It's quite controversial. It seems like the controversy is kind of starting to dissipate. People just want to be able to move in a bus in vast parts of the city. I'll ask you the question I asked the others. If we get that on the table today, that in the places it's recommended we proceed, but in other places, do the evaluation and come back to us in 2021 because we do need it as soon as possible. Do you think the youth cabinet would endorse that action? You know, us recognizing it takes some time to figure out the feasibility of these things, but putting it forward on their behalf?
Yes. It would be our preference to have the bus lanes to start being implemented as soon as possible, and if beginning in 2021 is the soonest that's possible, then that would be acceptable.
Yeah. Some now, some later. Yeah. You think we could, should the commission maybe come back and walk through the process of getting to a timely recommendation at a youth cabinet event?
Members of the TTC board are certainly welcome to come and speak to the youth cabinet anytime.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Eli.
Thanks very much for the deputation. Can you think of other examples in the City of Toronto where we've decided to prioritize transit to move more people and had positive results?
I would, first one that would probably come to mind would be St. Clair. Streetcars used to get stuck in traffic and now they don't. And the result is that trip times are more predictable throughout the day, whereas on many of the routes that are proposed for bus lanes in this plan, for example, one that I have experienced, Dufferin Street, trip times tend to double during rush hour. So I'll do everything I can to avoid taking certain bus routes in rush hour because I don't want to spend twice as long on the bus. Queens Quay, I know, is an example of a very successful transit priority as well.
Maybe King Street as well.
Oh, King Street, there, the most obvious one, of course, yes.
But two other, perhaps less quoted examples, St. Clair and Queens Quay, very good. From the TTC's perspective, when we look at the numbers year over year, sometimes we see ridership flatlining and not necessarily having the growth, and yet more and more people are coming to Toronto. Do you think service standards play into that at all? Reliability, ease of use?
Yes, I would say that it probably does. Anyone who's taken the TTC's high ridership bus routes knows that there are sometimes capacity issues, and many of the routes are not necessarily overcrowded, but because of the unreliability that's caused by traffic congestion, buses don't come evenly spaced, and that leaves, if there's a gap, the first bus that comes will be full, and it will leave people standing on the street waiting for the next one. So this perception that people can't get on the bus, or the fact that they don't want to sit in traffic on a bus, I think could be limiting ridership growth.
If it's 600,000 additional cars or 150,000 additional cars, in either instance, would that contribute to more congestion on our streets?
Absolutely. And it basically, it would continue to have, it would have an even greater impact on the reliability of our bus service. Many of these suburban roads are actually very congested. I know as far back as the 1980s, there are headlines showing that the TTC advocates for bus lanes to avoid declining reliability on its bus routes. It's an issue that's been around for a long time, and it's only getting worse, and the time to act is now.
So if we're going to provide avenues to grow the TTC, respond to the increasing demand, a big part of that is improving the reliability in the service. A way to do that would be bus priority.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much.
McKelvey had a question. I think I saw. You're good now? Anybody else? I thank you very much. I think you got a lot of interest from your presentation, and I thank everybody who was able to speak to us today. So if we could hear now from staff to tell us what they think about all of this. And Kathleen Llewellyn-Thomas, our Chief Customer Officer, is going to introduce the service plan report
Thank you very much.
with her team.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Heisey. Before the video and the presentation begin, I'd like to present some context for the 5-year service plan and 10-year outlook. In 2018, our CEO, Rick Leary, published a far-reaching corporate plan to guide the TTC in answering the question, what does a world-class public transit system for Toronto look like, not just in the next 5 years, but over the next 25? The resulting corporate plan for 2018 to 2022 and beyond sets out 5 critical paths to advance the TTC to the next level. The corporate plan also commits to backing the critical paths with detailed action plans and resourcing to make sure we can deliver. The first detailed action plan was presented last January when the TTC's capital investment plan, Making Headway, was presented to the board, and it supports the path to transform to financial sustainability. The CIP identified TTC's capital investment priorities, and I know that you're all familiar with that. The 5-year service plan and 10-year outlook is another...
For a second, I know that everybody's got something they need to talk about, various items, but there was a lot of chatter in the background, and I'd like to hear the presentation, as I know most people would hear. So if you have a conversation, take it outside. Thanks.
Thank you. The 5-year service plan and 10-year outlook is another of the detailed action plans. It supports the corporate priorities to move customers more reliably, make public transit seamless, and innovate for the long term. In 2020, we will be working on another set of detailed action plans, some arising from this 5-year service plan, and others, including a wayfinding strategy, non-fare revenue strategy, and the 5-year fare policy, which we've already identified to the board. This 5-year service plan has been a priority because it sets out the multi-year approach we'll take to our core business, providing transit service for customers. It establishes the service levels upon which the TTC can build out its other plans. I want to thank my fellow TTC chiefs for their insights and supports in preparing this plan, and also particularly thank Greg Lintern and Barbara Gray from the City of Toronto, who've been helping us make sure that these plans are integrated with the City of Toronto thinking. I particularly want to draw attention to my colleagues James Pertola and Matt Davis, who are here. James is here from the Planning Department, and Matt Davis is here from Transportation Services. Thank you so much for sitting here to address the board's questions. And then finally, I most of all want to thank Mark Miss and Stephanie Simard for their leadership of this plan, and Sierra Bueller. These are the 3 people who've joined you at the end of the table, and the whole service planning team for bringing their expertise and commitment to this plan. So over to Mark and Stephanie.
More than 2.7 million people call the City of Toronto home. In the next 10 years, the city's population and employment will continue to grow, on average by 1% every year. This means traffic congestion will only get worse. Transit is the backbone of the transportation network. More than 1.7 million trips are made on the TTC each weekday, of which 70% use TTC buses or streetcars. To keep Toronto moving, we need to plan ahead and make significant improvements. Reduce single-occupant vehicle trips. Prioritize public transit. And run a more frequent and reliable transit system. The TTC's 5-year service plan and 10-year outlook outlines the concrete steps we need to take to ensure the transportation network is sustainable and meets growing demand. It focuses on making immediate improvements so that the TTC can move more customers safely, reliably, and swiftly across Toronto. The plan depends on 5 pillars at key opportunities along a customer's journey. First, we need to enhance the transit network to provide more options so you can get where you want to go, when you want to go. When the Line 5 Eglinton LRT opens, more than 50 TTC bus routes will connect with the new line. To enhance your experience before you board a transit vehicle, we need to install more helpful features at transit stops, including shelters and next vehicle arrival signs. To improve service reliability and provide transit service that our customers can count on, we need to review and update all surface transit schedules. To provide a fast service that values our customers' journey time, we need to invest in transit priority, including bus-only lanes on our busiest bus corridors. And we need to accelerate integration with other transit agencies and modes of transport. We'll explore new technologies like the automated vehicle that will connect local residents with the Rouge Hill GO Station. The 5-year service plan and Tenure outlook ensures that TTC is doing its part to enhance mobility in the city. This plan advances the city's goals outlined in the official plan, Transform TO, Corporate Strategic Plan, Resilience Strategy, and the Poverty Reduction Action Plan. Let's put public transit and riders first. When it comes to transit service, let's make the next stop even better. Read the 5-year service plan and 10-year outlook at ttc.ca.
Great. So multi-service plans are a best practice in the transit industry. They provide public, stakeholders, and elected officials with a clear view of service improvements to address specific needs over a set horizon. So this is our first 5-year service plan. It's our blueprint for service to be delivered between 2020 and 2024. Every year, we will prepare an annual plan, and this annual process will allow us to update our plans to reflect changes that may have occurred, such as construction. It will also give us another opportunity to consult with our customers and stakeholders and refine and finalize a service plan for the upcoming year. The plan will also serve as the basis for annual operating budgets and 10-year capital budgets. So the plan is based on a powerful combination of technical analysis, operational insights, as well as experiences and priorities that were shared by transit users, transit advocates, and many of the organizations and institutions that we work with and we're proud to serve. And feedback received through the consultation contributed directly to the strength of this plan, and we're very happy to report that the vast majority of online respondents, they support the plan, with 2 out of 3 saying that they highly support the plan. I want to spend a little bit of time now going over the background review and giving you some information about Toronto's unique context. So we know and we heard that Toronto is a dynamic and growing city. Population and employment has grown by 1% over the last 10 years and is projected to continue to grow. This means approximately 22,000 people per year and 16,000 new jobs coming to Toronto every year. As a result, we need a transit service that's also growing and dynamic. We've heard from many of the deputations, increases in traffic congestion has largely impacted service reliability. And as Toronto and the region grow, traffic congestion will continue making surface transit slower and more unreliable. This not only affects transit service reliability, but it also has an impact on the overall quality of life, health, safety, and our regional economy. All levels of government agree that in order to achieve the city's vision and goals, Toronto's transportation network must move people more efficiently, and this means reducing single-occupant vehicle trips, increasing travel options, reducing reliance on the car, prioritizing public transit, and improving reliability and frequency of our service. At the highest level, the official plan aims to direct growth to cities' avenues, centers, downtown, and employment areas. And this is where service can be provided effectively and efficiently and help us achieve the city's goal of reducing auto dependency. As part of this plan, we have reviewed all the development applications in the pipeline, and we've identified areas where population and employment growth is expected to be the highest over the next 5 years, and these hotspots are displayed on the map on the slide. This is where we expect to see increases in demand for transit service over the next 5 years. Toronto is remarkable in that 30% of all trips are made on the TTC, and this is incredible. Contributing to this is the fact that in Toronto, there is a higher than average number of people who rent their home, are of the millennial generation, are racialized, are low income, and live in apartments. We also know that 22% of the population lives in the city's defined neighborhood improvement areas. All of these indicators, which have been proven to have higher transit usage, further highlight the critical role that transit plays in our city. Changes to population and the economy are also driving regional and city travel patterns. We know at the regional level, 18% of all regional trips are made on public transit. This supports and presents an opportunity for improving integration with our partner agencies. As already mentioned, 30% of all trips are made on the TTC in Toronto, and this is remarkable for Canada and US standards. Nearly half of the long-distance trips are made on the TTC, and this presents a need to enhance the surface transit network. In terms of local travel patterns, as part of this process, we have consulted with stakeholders, and our annual planning process will also give us the opportunity to identify local changes, and this will allow us to be up to date and make changes as necessary to routes. From an operations perspective, we know improvements to surface transit are critical over the next 5 years. That's because 70% of all trips on the TTC include a trip on the surface network, so bus or streetcar. This is exceptional by Canada and US standards, and we know that one customer boards our bus network for every minute of bus service that we provide. We've also completed a jurisdictional scan of Canada and the US, and the TTC operates 13 of the 24 heaviest bus ridership routes with little to no transit priority compared to other jurisdictions. Given that we have high ridership corridors, we also have high ridership stop areas. On the screen is a map of 22 locations where more than 4,500 customers board each weekday. To put that into perspective, only 6 GO Transit rail stations exceed that threshold, yet they have customer amenities at all rail stations. So there's an opportunity for the TTC to make improvements at our stop areas. Near all of our routes operate in mixed traffic. Increases in traffic congestion again affecting our service, and the majority of our routes require schedule improvements to ensure that service is being delivered as advertised. As a result of that background and technical review, the vision for the study was to focus on improvements that enhance the TTC's core competency. This is mass transit, and that means moving large volumes of customers safely, reliably, and swiftly across Toronto.
The vision takes shape around 5 pillars of opportunity as described in the video. The pillars are intended to improve each step of our customer's journey. Each pillar has specific action items. In total, there are 20 action items that include various initiatives to be implemented between 2020 and 2024. Please refer to your handouts for those sitting in the back, and for commissioners, please refer to page 76 in the package. The color boxes indicate when actions and their specific initiatives progress to a milestone or are implemented. Pillar 1 identifies the need to enhance the transit network. The action items include accommodating growth and new travel patterns, implementing rapid transit improvements, enhancing the streetcar network, and applying a social equity lens to service planning over the next 5 years. More so than any other pillar, the actions in this pillar are interdependent. The opening of Line 5, Line 6, and enhancing the streetcar network frees buses to redeploy to implement other actions in this plan. Pillar 2 identifies the need to enhance the customer experience at key surface transit stop areas. The actions include improving amenities at stops, wayfinding, and placemaking over the next 5 years. The actions in this initiative build on existing plans like the City Street Furniture Program and the TTC's accessible stop and wayfinding programs. It's about working in partnership with the city and directing resources to where they are strategically needed the most. Pillar 3 identifies the need to improve service reliability. One of the actions, 3.1, improve surface transit schedules, was identified as the most important action in the plan by the public. It begins with improvements to weekday and weekend schedules between 2020 and 2021, followed by overnight schedules and ongoing schedule upkeep in outer years. Pillar 4 aims to prioritize surface transit. Over the next 5 years, in partnership with City Transportation Services and City Planning, we will explore bus transit lanes on 5 of the busiest bus corridors in the city. They include Eglinton East, Finch East, Steeles West, Jane, and Dufferin. Also in partnership with the city, we will continue to implement queue-jump lanes and install transit signal priority throughout the city. Pillar 5 identifies the need to accelerate integration with partner transit agencies and other modes of transportation over the next 5 years. Some of the actions have specific improvements identified in 2020, like integration with microtransit services and cycling, while other actions require more work in conjunction with city departments starting in 2020 with the development of work plans. Together, the 20-point action plan presents a multi-year plan that identifies the transit needs in the City of Toronto over the next 5 years. Each year, we'll refine these actions, consult with the public, and finalize an annual service plan. The annual service plan will be presented to the board in advance of TTC operating and capital budget discussions. Beyond 2024, population and employment will continue to grow by 1% per year on average. We need to continue to improve the speed, reliability, and frequency of our services. This means we need to expand our fleet and facilities. As noted on the right, there are a number of rapid transit improvements that are currently in the planning and design stage, all of which enhance transit in the City of Toronto. The plan generates benefits that advance both the city's and TTC's objectives. The plan advances the city's economic prosperity, social well-being, and environmental sustainability. The plan accommodates growth, enhances transit service to neighborhood improvement areas, promotes healthy exercise and activity by advancing connections with active modes of transport, supports mental health and well-being by increasing service reliability and thereby reducing customer uncertainty, reduces emissions, achieves specific actions in the city's resilience strategy, and focuses on making better use of our roads by prioritizing people. The plan advances the TTC's mission of providing a reliable, efficient, and integrated bus, streetcar, and subway network. The plan increases transit customer trips by 35 million, provides more frequent service in high-growth areas and where demand will increase, provides more reliable service as we trend towards 90% on-time departures, provides more rapid service with the implementation of improvements on Line 1, Line 5, and Line 6, new express routes, and transit priority measures, and upgrades stop amenities for customers of all abilities as we advance our family of services approach. The vision of the plan identifies a swift or fast service as a key focus. By reducing travel times, we can increase access to employment by public transit. The map on the screen shows improvements to Line 1, Line 5, Line 6, new express routes, and priority bus lanes. Layered under these is a heat map. The darker the color, the greater the increase in access to jobs. As seen, the majority of improvements are in the outer parts of Toronto, where many of the city's 31 neighborhood improvement areas are located. The investment summary outlines the operating and capital costs required to implement the plan. The 20-point action plan includes initiatives to improve service for existing and future customers between 2020 and 2024. On the screen is a table that shows gross operating costs by action item by year. By 2024, the implementation of the plan is estimated to increase the TTC's annual gross operating costs of $174 million. Of this amount, $3.7 million will be requested through the TTC's 2020 operating budget, which will be considered by the board at its special meeting on December 16th, 2019. Over the next 5 years, more vehicles are required to operate in service to implement the plan. On the screen is a table that shows in-service vehicle requirements by mode, by year. The table shows that 76 more buses, 50 more streetcars, more trains on Line 1 and Line 2, new trains on Line 5 and Line 6 are required in service over the next 5 years. These additional vehicles will be maintained and stored at new facilities, including McNichol Bus Garage, facility to support more streetcars, and facilities to support Line 5 and Line 6, respectively. To meet the transit needs of our growing city over the next 5 years, capital funding will be required to buy more vehicles, improve stop areas, and implement transit priority measures. On the screen is a table that shows estimated capital requirements by year. In total, it is estimated that nearly $780 million is required over the next 5 years. Of this, $34 million will be requested through the TTC's 2020 to 2029 capital plan, while 745 million is not funded due to funding constraints. These estimated capital costs are captured in the TTC's 2020 to 2029 capital plan. The plan identifies the transit needs in the City of Toronto over the next 5 years. The plan has been developed in consultation with the public and stakeholders. We're confident this plan meets the needs of our customers because 95% of people who reviewed it support it. We recognize that the 5-year service plan is yet to be funded, but we believe it's important to lay out our first multi-year service plan so that decision makers can make decisions about transit in this city with the needs before them. This concludes the presentation, and we're happy to take questions.
Thanks very much. I know Councillor Karygiannis has a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I understand there was a number of routes that you identified, and some of those routes didn't make it. Can you please elaborate what criteria you used?
The criteria that's used to determine whether a route or service request passes is the service standards, the TTC service standards.
Is there room maybe for allowing you to revisit and maybe doing a trial run in a particular area?
The service standards are clear in that they're objective and they provide transparency on how decisions are made. Of course, if this board were to choose to provide increased tolerances to the service standards to allow for pilots, as staff, we would provide our best recommendation as to how to be as close to the service standards as possible.
All right. You mentioned the McNichol Bus Garage. When is that supposed to be finalized?
We are providing service or planning for service to be rolling out of McNichol Bus Garage in late November of 2020.
Wasn't it originally supposed to be May or June? Would I be incorrect in that? Then we moved the dates farther out?
Through you, Chair. I think Susan Reed Tanaka, maybe you can give us some we're talking McNichol, just the actual transition.
Got a bed writing on this.
My understanding is this spring, next spring, they'll be turning it over to the TTC, and then we'll spend some time doing commissioning and moving buses over so that we'll be up and operational in November of next year. But just correct me if my timing is off.
I could add that from a service planning perspective, November is the best board period or time of year to implement a new garage. We are in the summertime. We usually make service reductions, which is a cost savings, and it reflects demand. And in September, new services roll out. November is the quietest board of all, and there are a number of routes that will be moving across the city at that point in time.
Would I be incorrect if my memory serves me correct? Wasn't it supposed to be May 2020?
Through the chair, if I may, we plan to hand the keys over to operations the end of June of next year.
So June is the date that we should see buses rolling out of there?
No, that's when the construction ends, and then operations starts to fit out the facility for operation at the end of the year.
And are we still on target for $181 million, I believe it was?
Yes, we are.
Are we going to have any overruns?
No, we're not.
Underruns?
We may, our contingency right now is just under 5%, I believe, spent.
You say contingency, that's 181, 5% of that's 10 million that we might run over?
No. We had a contingency amount within the 181, and of that contingency amount, I think it was 8% or just under that, and we've spent approximately 4.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much, and through the chair. Considering what we've heard during the deputations today, I think it's obvious that transit priority, as articulated in the report here, has a lot of support from the deputants, and I think that's great. I was just wondering what the impact was on ridership when we move forward with transit priority on King Street pilot.
I don't recall at the moment, but I remember it being in the mid-70,000s per day, ballpark, going up to 84,000 to what it is today.
Right. So when we improved the service and we made a priority, transit priority, more people actually started using the service.
Yeah, and that is because reliability is increased and the speed of service increases as well. And what that does for customers who ultimately choose to take the service is it reduces their time, their journey time.
Right. So would the TTC anticipate similar results along these bus priority routes?
That is the goal. The goal is to improve reliability and to improve the speed of service for the tens of thousands of people that take those specific corridors.
So with that in mind and building on Councillor Perk's questions, would we have the vehicles available to support and enhance service along these 5 corridors?
The plan identifies 76 more buses as part of over the next 5 years. I also mentioned in the presentation that a number of vehicles are redeployed because of the opening of Line 5 and Line 6 and the purchase of new streetcars. So there is sufficient vehicles to accommodate an increase in demand.
Okay. And then how did we land on the 5 priority bus routes? Was that based on ridership levels or projections of growth? Specifically, why those 5 versus other parts, other routes and existing services?
There's 3 criteria that we use at a very high level. The first one, that it aligns with city objectives. All 5 corridors are included on map 5 of the city's official plan, which is surface transit priority corridors. They also, as I don't remember, Eli, I believe his name was mentioned. They also serve neighborhood improvement areas, so that's the city building objective criteria. They also are the highest ridership corridors in Canada and the United States. There's a demand perspective. And the third criteria was that they that there is issues with operational performance, reliability, and so providing, as you suggested earlier, priority lanes is an opportunity to improve that.
How did we land on the $42 million estimate?
The $42 million estimate is a very high-level order of magnitude estimate that requires much more detailed refinement. It was intended to say that it's not zero, and it was intended to say it's not $200 million.
I can appreciate that. Does that account for additional vehicles that would be required to deliver that service?
There's on page, and we can flip to the capital cost. I believe it's on page 92. Buses are included in that first line item.
Yep.
Bus transit lanes was intended to only be infrastructure improvements along the corridor.
Okay. And have we had an opportunity to get to that step where we're looking at existing infrastructure corridor improvements in the right-of-way, coordinating with transportation services? Do we know that we could get this stuff in there right now and line it up with capital work that's already scheduled?
In the board report, there's a recommendation that in Q1 of 2020, jointly TTC, City Transportation Services, and City Planning will come back with a work plan which will identify any quick wins or near-term opportunities and identify some of the future work that needs to be done. I do also want to make one more point. When we talk about improving the speed on a corridor, it also means that we don't need as many vehicles. So the faster the service is, the less vehicles we need to provide that same amount of capacity. So there's a built-in efficiency here as well from an operating perspective.
Okay, shifting gears here, pun. There's some commentary about bike share and trying to align the TTC with the bike network. And I'm also on the Toronto Parking Authority, and one of the challenges I hear from bike share is it's been difficult to work with TTC to actually get the bike share stations located at transit stations. And you articulate in here that you would like to do more of that. I guess if we're prioritizing that here in our 5-year service plan, do we have a shift of thinking or perhaps an opportunity for compromise to reflect the priority here with actually installing the infrastructure at the stations?
Through the chair, in the past, some of the challenges are that we don't always have the room at the stations, and the goal here is to work more closely with bike share and also look at expanding into the suburbs is where we want to work with them, and there's potentially more room out in that area, so that we have ongoing conversations to help make that.
And like a commitment to try and find a way to yes rather than no.
That's
Wonderful.
correct.
Thanks very much.
Okay, Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you. I thought the report was really good. It helps concentrate people, something to look at, comment on, So as a building block goes, I thought it was a really good piece of work. So thank you. My question is about just clarifying the operating and capital. You're pretty clear about the amount of capital that is funded and what isn't funded. And I'm wondering about the operating. So in the first year, this is $174 million all in over the 5 years. In the first year, we're budgeting 3.7, which is like something in the order of 2% of the total. So, it's like these back-end loaded baseball contracts. Are you confident we are going to be able to get the rest of it funded? Because we are definitely getting a bit of a free ride in year one of this deal from the operating side. I'm wondering.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the whole idea is to really, like our capital investment plan, set out what the needs are. And because we were finishing the work at the end of the year, we have proposed something that was within what we were understanding to be our budget targets in collaboration with the City of Toronto. Now that we have a longer runway to preparing the subsequent budgets 21 and beyond, that's what will have to be the discussions between staff and, of course, the leadership of boards, committee, and council.
Thank you.
Lalonde.
I'd like to commend management as well on what I think is a great plan, and I think we should be supporting finding ways to fund it. I've heard a couple of deputants characterize this plan as kind of a stand-pat plan, which seems inconsistent to me with a 5-year plan that opens 2 new mass transit lines, expands capacity on our busiest subway line, adds 75 buses, adds 60 streetcars. So my question is, does management have any comprehensive way of measuring capacity? Because when I look at page, whatever it is, 90 of the plan, and looks at all of the additional cars and vehicles that would be deployed under this plan, it looks to me like it's averaging a lot more than 1% capacity growth per year. I can appreciate that you're only forecasting 6.5% ridership growth, but I think that's because you're being prudent on how many people we can attract into these modes of transportation. My guess is that the capacity is growing much more quickly than that. But do you have such a measure?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll take a shot at that. What transportation planners and engineers are really good at doing is maybe individual vehicle capacity, route capacity. It becomes extremely complex when we look at a complete network and system where modes are different, prices are affecting people's choices, that kind of thing. So actually coming up with system capacity is pretty hard. Often you'll, from a network perspective, sometimes you'll cast a screen line and you'll say, the transit capacity south of Bloor looks like this, or the transit capacity entering, east-west into Scarborough. But it is difficult from an overall system perspective to say what the capacity is, because it's about vehicles, it's about schedules, and all those other variables. So my modeling people are telling me that it's a challenge to do it at a system level.
So I would only push back on that I can see how forecasting ridership is very difficult and complex. It seems to me that at least at a basic level, calculating capacity should not be so difficult. Like if you've got a train and you've got room for X number of people on that train and you run it X number of times a day, you know what the capacity is. How many people will actually ride it is a completely different story. But I think it would be useful for future presentations, and maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe it's not so easy. But you mentioned pricing. Pricing doesn't enter into capacity calculation. It enters into ridership calculations. So I think it would be useful for future iterations of this plan to try and come up with some measure of capacity as well, so that we can get some comprehensive measure as to what are we investing in terms of total capacity of the system. I'm done.
Okay. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you. So my first set of questions is about the B5, and you're calling them exclusive bus lanes. Jeez, Councillor Bradford. Okay, exclusive bus lanes. Could you just kind of outline, like, what are you seeing these as? Like, is this easy, nimble, quick, or like, is this a dedicated BRT type of line? Like, what is your vision for this?
Truthfully, we're still in the exploration stage. We need to work with city transportation services and city planning to determine what this will look like. But our goal would be to implement as soon as possible and as quickly as possible.
So unlike other projects where we will only do things in conjunction with like road resurfacing or reconstruction, like you're thinking this could just get it done, paint, change lines on the road, put up signs, fast.
Yes, I think the piece that needs to be reviewed is the implications on other road users, and so that may need to take a little bit more work on some other corridors, but there are some corridors that seem to be better candidates for quicker implementation than others.
So you're not looking at this as a massive capital investment, right? Quick.
No.
Okay. So when are you going to be reporting back on this to us?
Q1 2020.
Oh, fast. Great.
Very fast with the work plan. And as I mentioned, I believe to another question, that work plan will identify any quick wins and any longer term work that needs to be undertaken.
Okay, and why not Shepherd and Lawrence? So I'm just like Scarborough specifically, like those are also their other two top ones.
The 5 corridors are the 5 that we see as the top priority. We're not precluding implementing rapid transit lanes or transit signal priority or queue jump lanes on any other corridor. We needed to start with a list, and we identified these 5s as a beginning.
Okay. And can you just give me a little bit an overview? What is the Scarborough East study? What is the time frame for this, and what does this entail?
So we're actually next month in January, when we come back from the holidays, we'll be kicking off our 2021 annual service plan. As part of that annual service plan, we will be looking at some of the service changes that we're looking at for that year. That includes changes that are tied to the Eglinton Crosstown and also in the Scarborough area. And so the Scarborough area study, specifically to answer your question, looks at the routing structure within the area and identifies opportunities to provide more faster and more efficient routings. And so there's opportunities to work with community groups and interested customers to determine whether or not we have that draft concept right.
And so this is a 5-year plan with a 10-year outlook. So how are you seeing the management of this happening so that it can be adaptive, flexible, nimble, which we're not super great at? Like, is there any sort of management plan that you're looking to kind of use so that we can maybe take advantage of changes as they happen in real time?
The annual service plan, we essentially have set up a framework so that we can be more nimble. We've identified what the needs are in the City of Toronto over the next 5 years. Every year we'll come back with an annual service plan. In that annual service plan, we'll update what we see moving forward on the horizon. If that means that a project's delayed or advanced, we'll make those adjustments. So through the annual service plan, we'll be able to respond and be as nimble as possible.
And so would that also include, for example, major capital investments as they come forward? We have a lot of proposed projects that aren't funded, but if those were to become funded and timed and planned to a higher level detail, you would be able to look at your service quickly in response to that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner De Laurentiis.
Thank you. So terrific plan, and I think one of the elements that really makes this stand out is how data rich it is. You know, I think that we can all agree that if we have really good data, then decisions are easier to make, expenditures are easier to justify because you can see the reason, you can quantify it. The one area where I think we would all benefit from a little bit more data is around the quantification of the economic impact that transit has on the City of Toronto. It is mentioned. There's it's thematic. It goes through here, but I think again, if we can sharpen that data a little more, I think it would be really helpful, and it would really inform the decisions of the various levels of government that have to decide how to invest, where to invest, and that includes whatever pitches the city may be making to the province or to the federal level. So that's one area that I would encourage you to look at and really, ask a question as to whether you've done some thinking around that and what your plans might be.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think there's an opportunity for our team to expand our learnings and the way we present economic benefits.
Well, yeah, and one example I would give you, I've spent most of my career working downtown for financial services, and the bulk of the staff who work in that industry is support staff. And that support staff, not surprisingly, does not live in downtown Toronto, lives generally in the outskirts and in the suburbs. And the way that they get to work is through transit. So we are known, Toronto has managed to crack the top 10 financial service centers in the world. And it's because we have an incredibly vibrant financial services industry. And so to me, when you start to break that down and analyze the why, transit plays a big role in that because it's bringing that qualified staff. So that's the kind of data, it's the kind of, I think, awareness that we need to get out there, because we always talk about transit in terms of expenditures. It's expensive, it costs, but we should really be changing that language and talking about the investment, the value that it brings, because that's really the better measurement, the better criteria. So I'll stop there.
I have a few questions, and I'm going to be a proxy for Councillor Perks for a second. Is there a modal split objective between automobile, transit, bicycles? Is there a transit objective that the city has publicly stated? And given we don't have a mandate for the other modes, have we ever discussed what our desired modal split would be as a commission?
My colleague James has actually got some answers from the Transform TO plan.
I'd be happy for him to tell me.
Yeah, so the Transform TO plan, which is the Climate Change Action Plan, sets a modal target for active transportation and transit of by 2051, I believe it is the year, about 70.
What is it? What are those two things combined today? If that's our goal, where are we today? Because I remember cycling is around 4%. It's in the report.
Sorry, off the top of my head, I don't. It depends. It's very high in the downtown area.
Right, I know.
It's lower in the outer regions.
So we have not attempted through this service plan to, and this is staff, to achieve, to go to the modal split target that is an aspiration. And this plan you're talking about, and I'm sorry I'm not familiar with it, is it a city council approved plan that would form direction to this commission?
Yes, Transform TO is a council approved.
Okay. So then my question to you is, do you know, have you considered, I mean, it's an interesting question Councillor Perks put to us. Is it true what he said, that it's your view that we wouldn't achieve an increase in transit modal split with this service plan? We would just stay pat in a growing market with transit taking the same piece of the market. And I'm not sure what you should do with that yet, but I wanted to understand your answer.
I'm going to jump in, Vice Chair, and my staff will correct me if I'm wrong. I'll just say that we've already said that 30% of all trips are taken on transit in Toronto, and that would be kind of a global average. So that's in our report.
Right.
I would also say, based on my experience, that as the questions Councillor Bradford was asking said, sometimes, when you improve reliability and speed by exclusive bus lanes, then you can find the unmet demand, transit demand, people start taking transit more.
Right.
And so there are elements of this plan, if implemented, that would allow us to drive up the transit modal split. And then the City of Toronto transportation plans are also moving towards the other active modes as well.
So I'm not being critical, but have we got a projection as to a change in modal split as a result of these kinds of changes?
I think with the comments that we're receiving today, we can see how we can improve our reporting out on this plan next year. And that's something we'll certainly add to do the total capacity, working with perhaps the Board of Trade to understand economic impact, and now your question about modal split.
Councillor Perks said that we needed 60 additional streetcars. I won't get to buses yet. But I looked in the report, I thought it was 50. I'm not sure which is correct.
I can clarify that.
Yeah.
It's 50 vehicles in service, 10 held back, which are called spares to use industry jargon.
Okay. And in terms of turnaround for a streetcar, for us to get a streetcar delivery, I remembered that we had an option at one point with Bombardier to purchase additional streetcars. I remember 60 is in my head. And I think that option has expired, which it probably wouldn't have been exercised given the delivery schedules. Have we discussed with Bombardier what they're able to do to deliver streetcars quickly if we needed them? We as a company.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I've had a number of just conversations over the last 6 months with Bombardier regarding any deliveries possible. They know that we need vehicles in the 22 to 24 timeframe. They had always hoped to get it an order expeditiously by now, and I've been very clear to them through the CIP process and the budgetary process that funding is not available at this time.
Okay. So I travel every day on the Bay Street Clearway on my bicycle, and I can tell you it is not working and it is not enforced. So I must say, based on the current regulatory environment that we operate in, I'm not excited by new dedicated bus lanes because I haven't seen the commitment, except in King Street, where I have seen a commitment of public sector resources and enforcement to achieve an outcome. So this is both a question and a statement. Do these busways work without camera enforcement? Because I don't think they do. So I told you my answer. Give me your answer.
I think there's examples across the Greater Toronto area that shows that they do work. I know York Region is a great example of it working. I know there's elements of bus rapid transit in Brampton where it works with many queue jump lanes, approximately 80 across the city. I think enforcement, camera enforcement or on-the-street enforcement is something that we'll need to look at when we come back and provide the details on the plan.
Okay, so my recollection, I've driven by the Viva lanes on Highway 7 a couple of times, and they appear to have a degree of physical separation. They've got platforms inside the middle of the road allowance, in the center of the road allowance. There appear to me to be physical barriers, at least visual barriers for movement of a car into the bus lane. Are you envisaging that kind of setup in the rights of way? Because I have difficulty imagining the space for a Viva solution in some of the rights of ways that you've identified.
At this moment, we're still exploring and identifying what it could look like. I think there are elements of the Viva Rapid Transit Way that could work in the Toronto context. I know they use red paint to demarc pavement. That is an indicator that this is for bus onlys. I know Mississauga does that as well, close to square one. So there are elements that we can take from our neighbors that work and apply it in Toronto.
Okay. I look forward to hearing your further report. Thanks. I'm guessing there are some people burning to make some statements. So Councillor Karagiannis put up his finger first, and Councillor McKelvey, then Councillor Bradford. Go, please.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the presentation, the deputations, and the work that the staff have been put into this. I think that we're in good hands. However, with a few more tubes along the way, like subways, especially in Scarborough, I think will even be better. But I hope it's not a pipe dream along the way. However, I do have a motion that I'd like to put forward, if it can be placed up. I think that there's some room that staff can probably consider and have some opportunities that to pilot some of the programs that we've been advocating in the growth priority area, so I'm putting that motion forward, and I commend the staff to take a look at it, especially in areas where there's high traffic, in areas where there's a lot of newcomers, in areas where there's potential growth, and in areas where we can certainly help our riders not having to walk that far and get out of the cold. So I would leave this matter in the capable hands of our CEO and his staff. And I'm looking forward to getting updated on the McNichol Bus Garage, because I have to tell you, I got a little bet getting on there. Either I'm going to lose it or I'm going to win it. So having said that, I leave that motion to staff's capability. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. The next speaker is Councillor McKelvey.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion that TTC Board directs that any planning or investigation of exclusive bus lanes along the Eglinton East Avenue corridor recognizes the Eglinton East LRT and doesn't impede that in any way. And also that staff investigate the potential for exclusive bus lanes on Lawrence Avenue East, given that there are no plans for higher order transit along this route in the future. A good city uses all modes of transportation, subways, light rail, and buses to come together in an integrated transit network. And I'm really excited by this report because it recognizes the importance of our surface routes. And I'm really confident that the hard work and commitment of our TTC staff will make the next stop even better, like the title of the report. Well played. And there are 4 extremely busy bus lines in Scarborough, and the 2 most are the Finch East and the Eglinton East corridor. And so I am excited that they are being considered for these dedicated bus lanes. That said, the Eglinton East LRT remains a major priority for the residents of Scarborough, and I want to make sure that whatever we do here doesn't impede that in any way in the future. And that's part of why I'm also asking that we look at Lawrence, because Lawrence runs parallel to that, and it has no plans for higher order transit. Scarborough hasn't had a new stop on higher order transit open since 1985. So we have exciting things that are coming with the opening of the Eglinton Crosstown. And I can't help but notice that we only have 19 days left in this decade. And so I'm really hopeful that we're going to know the 2020s as the decade that we finally build transit in Scarborough and shorten the commute times of Scarborough residents. And so I'd really like to thank TTC staff for putting forward what I feel is an ambitious plan. I look forward to advocating for the funding of this plan so that we can implement this as soon as possible. And I look forward to the report back about those dedicated bus lanes. I think it is a great solution that recognizes how much time Scarborough residents are spending on the bus, and all residents of Toronto for that matter, because there are other lines. And I look forward to seeing that report, but also hoping that we can get this done as soon as possible. Thank you.
Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much. Through the chair, I have a motion I'd like to introduce here. I fully support the proposal for priority corridors, and I actually really want to ensure that we're moving quickly and efficiently on this. I'm sure, as my colleagues here and fellow commissioners have heard, there's a lot of public support for this initiative. My office alone has received over 400 pieces of correspondence asking us to move this forward, and that's the intention of this motion, is to expedite and move us forward from exploring to actually getting the work done. So we're going to have staff come back Q1 and have a implementation timeline, prioritization plan, and integrated work plan for the proposal of the enhanced priority corridors. I'd like to thank staff for their work on this. This is actually a very forward-looking document. I think the fact that we're pairing the investments strategically with the growth that's anticipated in the city, of course, that makes a lot of sense. And you know, I think it represents where we are now and how we are actually going to move forward. We often focus on higher order transit here, and that's subways or LRTs, but the reality is our surface transit does a lot of the heavy lifting in this city. Majority of trips on the TTC actually start on a bus. And these 5 corridors in particular move 250,000 people every single day. So it makes sense for us to build on the success of other programs in the City of Toronto, like King Street Pilot, where we have prioritized people. We've prioritized moving people. And that's what I think we're intending to do here. It would be a bold move for this city. It certainly wouldn't be the first of its kind, but it would be a bold move here in Toronto. And I think it's a recognition that, with the growth, with the constraints, the fact that we are not building more roads, we need to start getting smart about how we can move the most people most effectively. I think this is a great way to do that, and that's why I want to get going on this right away, landing this early in the 5-year plan and start the work now so that we can actually get the changes in place. I know that was something that echoes comments from the mayor to really see us moving forward on this. And I think that, having come off the experience of King Street and, sort of the polarizing nature of that, but a general recognition that it is working, it has been effective, and we have the data and the numbers to support that. There's a lot of lessons that we can learn for these bus quarters as well, and take and draw on that experience of the King Street pilot to make sure that we have an even smoother implementation. I think it's also very timely that this plan is landing with the increase to the city building levy and securing those funds for transit and housing investment. I think when residents see their tax bill going up, they're going to expect to see the results that they're paying for. And this is certainly going to be something very tangible. So we heard from deputants, when you improve the reliability of the service, transit becomes a viable option for more people. We have a lot of priorities, we have a lot of goals, we have a climate change emergency, we have transform TO, we have mode shift aspirations in the city, and the only way we're going to get there is if we start making these systems more competitive. If we start making transit the better way, if we start making active transportation safer for people. This plan speaks to all of that. It gives us a roadmap on how to get it done. And I want to thank staff and the thousands of Torontonians who participated in the consultation process to give us this document and really show us the way ahead. So hope you can support the motion, and I'm enthusiastic, 100% behind this plan, and want to see it get it done. Can't get it done quick enough. Thanks.
Any further speakers? I'd just like to make a few remarks. I've lived in Toronto all my life, and I've never seen a transit period where there wasn't a group of the population that said we needed more transit. And I just think it's like a reflex reaction for certain people, but it may be that now they're absolutely right, and I'm concerned that we can't deliver enough, even if we had the resources to do it, because I think we're starting from behind. And I do think the other part of this equation is population growth. And on a societal basis, are we growing at a rate where we can provide the hospitals, the schools, and the transit that we need? That's beyond the ambit of this commission. But I have to say that no one's talked about population growth. And I would say as well that council make development decisions that correspond to the transit infrastructure that we're going to have available in a reasonable time frame. And I'm concerned there's a bit of a disconnect in some of our planning decisions. So I just wanted that out there because we're only talking about one half of the equation, which is how we address the very difficult problem we're facing of providing good transit service to all of our citizens. And I'm concerned, I think this is a terrific plan, but I'm concerned it won't be enough. So I do agree, and I think that's because the level of population growth is so significant that we're going to have difficulty keeping up. So I think I was very impressed by what happened on King Street. I was skeptical that it would work. I think it's worked very well. And if we can introduce a Viva concept and it works on some of the, that kind of right-of-way in some of the suburban arterials, I think that would be a spectacular outcome for the city and really improve things. So I look forward to this going forward, and I'm going to support all of the motions that have been presented today. All in favor of this motion? Carried. Councillor McKelvey's first motion, I think she has two. No? No. Okay. All in favor? Commissioner Brantford's resolution. All in favor? Adopted. and adopt the item as amended. Thank you, Jen. There we are. So we are on to deputations. The remaining deputations are 3 items, and I've got to find my deputation list. Item 12, Mr. Shen. And Mr. Shen, if you could keep if it's possible, if you could keep your deputation to 3 minutes, this is a fairly focused item. Okay, I'm good with that. Yeah, why not?
I encourage the board to pass the motion, review 70 O'Connor bus route. Voting against the motion contributes to the frustration of dissatisfied TC passengers. Voting for the motion could result in improved TT service simply by better use of the resources the TTC has. For me, this investigation will confirm riders' complaints concerning poor streetcar and bus service by following the bus's footprints. The investigation will challenge how meaningful the TT statistics are when measuring service compared to passenger experience. Steve Monroe was able to find a way to recap the history of the O'Connor bus footprints by assembling actual bus tracking data. He published his findings at stevemonroe.ca on November 20th. He observed that the buses tend to travel in bunches rather than spacing themselves out evenly. His analysis concludes that buses are consistently bunching, but not just accidentally. The rest of this is based on my plagiarization of his work, so I refer to his site, stevemonroe.ca, November 20th, to find the actual wording. As a passenger, I feel that there is something wrong when waiting after 20 minutes for a bus. I see across the street 4 buses following each other going the opposite direction. Bunched up buses will delay service for everyone waiting at all the other stops on the route. These delays cause uneven spacing and are not measured. The TTC only measures performance at one stop on the whole route, the on-time performance at a terminal, ignoring the potentially longer delays at all the other stops. There is a cost of consideration to the service disruption. The Amalgamated Transit Union contract has big penalties for operators getting off their shift late. Priority is to have operators leave on time to cut back overtime costs. It's been suggested that short-term routes are used to get the operators back to their terminals at shift end. These short turns create gaps in service for passengers already on the bus whose destination was further on, and all passengers waiting for buses at stops beyond the turnoff. It appears that the monument's performance includes 2 measurable indicators: the number of short turns and on-time performance at terminals. It can be suggested that neither indicator is a good measure of service level as experienced by passengers. It's because we're not measuring bunching. The best use of buses is to space and assign buses to meet passenger demand flow. This is easier said than done. However, when 4 buses are on the same route are bunched, this is a bad case scenario that can be systematically identified and avoided. I expect that the investigation will confirm that the bunching of buses occurs consistently, while noting that some bunching is unavoidable, such as traffic congestion and surges in passengers. There are cases of bunching that are not appropriately detected nor addressed by By measuring bus on-time performance at every stop, not just at the terminal, a better measure of passenger service is experienced, passenger experience is made. Voting against the motion contributes to the frustration of dissatisfied TC's passengers. I've lost my wrong page. Sorry. Voting for the motion voting for the motion would result in improved TTC service simply by better use of the resources that TTC already has. So I encourage the board to pass the motion review of 70 O'Connor bus route. Thank you.
So I'm proposing that we now vote on the notice of motion. All in favor? Done. You were convincing. Item number 14, Mr. Cohoon, and he's interested in speaking to the notice of motion that I've put forward. If we could put that up on the board, and I've added an amendment to it after consulting further with ACAT. And just to explain the background to this motion, I was told that at an ACAT meeting, that when elevator standards are considered, that the TTC has a higher accessibility standard for elevators than other agencies and the building code. And we get into situations where there are interactions between our subway and private elevators that service our subway, and they are not required to meet it's a negotiation about whether they have to meet our own elevator standard. And in this motion, I'm trying to cut through that to say that we won't accept an elevator connection unless it meets our standard. So, Adam, that's the background to it, and we added to the words in consultation with the Advisory Committee on Accessible Transit. Mr. Arbini asked me to put that in, and I was very happy to accept that as a friendly amendment. So I'd look forward to hearing what you've got to tell us.
Hey, I'm Adam Kuhn. What I wanted to tell you on the issue is I wanted to say thank you for actually working on it. And I want you guys to understand, and I know that in some ways this statement is more going to the people at Metrolink, but I want you guys to really show to the government that if they're subsidizing Wheel-Trans, that the more Metrolinks and other people actually work up to the standards you have. And I'm actually thinking that you guys should be looking at further standards. With the latest smart technology, I should be able to actually ask an elevator to go to my floor the same way I'm able to talk to my telephone and stuff. So there are things you could probably do that's even more. But the main thing to know is to let them know the sooner they understand that if they cut corners and put in elevators that are subpar, which the province and other building people like to do, that it's actually going to cost you guys more money because more people will not be using the family of service. But I do want to thank you for going on and actually bringing this motion. And the main thing I wanted to say was thank you. And as an individual with a disability, actually thank you for this.
You're welcome, Adam, but I actually thank you because you just gave me a very good idea about voice recognition in elevators, and I'm going to bring that up at the next ACAT meeting. So thanks for that. Favor? Done. And the final item, we're almost there, past the finished post. Deputant on item... which item is it?
Item 15 subway.
It's 15 subway closures. Well, that's pretty convenient, Adam. Go to it.
Okay. What I need to say on this item is the one group that is left more in the dark than any other group when it comes to these subway closures and shuttle bus mania is people with disability. Now, the one request I'm actually going to make to you guys is you actually look at when there is a subway closure and that you actually set up an actual hotline for people with disabilities or even people with mental illness and other invisible disabilities that can't stand on a crowded bus. And so that we can find out where the Wheel-Trans shuttles are, especially with those beloved. We're gonna do the shuttle from Lawrence to St. Clair. I get it where the crossovers and where the train turns are. But it's confusing for people with disability to realize they have to get off at York Mills. And up until now, there's been at least staff at the collector's booth. But one of my friends had an extra half an hour, not actually getting a trip on the Wheel-Trans shuttle, actually communicating and finding out because he's blind, he's got low vision, and his fiance has got direction issues. They took half an hour even figuring out where the shuttle was. And they did have cell service because they were able to talk to me. And I was able to finally get them to find the right person and not just a red smock person that didn't know, but an actual collector. But I'm saying that you guys have to look at finding a pilot of actually setting up a hotline. It would probably be to start maybe go to the dispatchers at Wheel-Trans, but a separate line so they don't have to wait to actually talk to people when there are problems like this. And second of all, then now with more collectors leaving this station and booth, this hotline could also be used by individuals when they are traveling and they hit one of those elevator broken or vehicles that short turn or other little things that, most people think are minor problems, but actually cause bigger problems. Right now, the only option we have, which I know there are certain board members that hate us saying that, is picking up our smartphone and calling one of those rideshare apps that know where we are because they can track us on our phone. We just hit a button and boom, we actually get a vehicle. But in order, you can't use the argument, you can't use honest Ed style of customer service anymore, where if you can't find someone to tell the problem to, there is no actual problem. We need to be able to tell people when our ride is disrupted. We need a hotline to actually communicate, and maybe it's even figuring out which bus route we go to, or maybe on the bad weather days, Wheel-Trans does say, okay, we will send you a shuttle in between things. So, that is my advice, is to just look at setting up a hotline and actually doing it, rather than have people with disability decide, I'm not going to go out most weekends because most weekends there's a shutdown. And half people in Toronto don't actually look at the fine print and actually look at where the shutdown is. They just say, there's a subway shutdown. I guess I'm going to drive.
So we have a motion from Councillor McKelvey. Yep. And would you like to give an explanation for the motion, or? I didn't think, I was looking.
So I just, based on that comment that we heard from
basis, for example, during a planned subway or unplanned Scarborough RT closure. So we are planning a whole bunch of closures next year, and so maybe there's a way that in some cases we can have a dedicated lane, for example, along Yonge while there's a shutdown. Or, if the Scarborough RT is going to continue to be a problem, which is very likely, maybe there's scenarios where we could look at how we could rapidly deploy some dedicated bus lanes in association with that. So it's just a report back to look at a little deeper into what Scarborough Transit Action had proposed there and what other jurisdictions are doing and what we can do in the city.
I strongly support the motion. I am very frustrated by what I see in the city where, for example, you'll have a closure of 2 lanes on Bay Street with no priority given to bus transportation in the remaining 2 lanes. And the transit system doesn't work. It just breaks down because there's so much congestion. And I think looking at how not just rapid deployment, planned deployment of detours and bus priority list, I'd like to get some insight into why we don't do that. Why in major transit corridors, when there's lane closures, we're not giving priority to transit over other kinds of vehicles. If staff could sort of incorporate that thought into their response, I'd be grateful. So all in favor of the motion? Adopt the item as amended. Away we go. Motion to adjourn. See you Monday.